everyone. Welcome to the show. It's Jeff Gerstmann here with you on the Jeff Gerstmann Show this week, where we're going to talk about video games, the latest of them, the things that are happening in and around them, and the people that make them, and their choices that they make on social media. I don't know, man. Woo! Here we are to talk about video games. It is September 16th, 2025. This is the first time we have convened for this program since the release of Borderlands 4. I've got a full review of that up if you want to see it. It's if you want to read that review, it's on Patreon, patreon.com/Jeff Gerstmann. You get an ad-free version of this show. The review is up there for free. You can just go check it out. And so on and so forth. So bonus podcast every week, all that other stuff. Go check that out. Hello. There's also a video, when the game came out. Borderlands 4 has been an interesting launch, and the days following, it was out on the morning of September 11th here in the States, at least on PC, and then console players had to wait until midnight because for whatever reason people still either can't or don't want to get that straight and launch it for everybody at the same time. I don't know. It's that stuff's dumb. Like, that stuff should be coming out. Okay, sometimes games have online servers that they don't want to get overwhelmed by a worldwide launch. Like, I get it on that front. Borderlands is not one of those games. But my view is that we should just be doing worldwide releases, and we should be playing games at 4 a.m. or whenever. People shouldn't have to go set their Xboxes to New Zealand in order to play video games. Just put it out. It's just not worth it. Just put it out, man. You don't need to do a midnight launch. You can just do, I don't know. That would probably change everything. If they wanted to do worldwide releases, they probably would time it around North America and just do midnight and tell the people in New Zealand to get effed, I guess, is probably how that would go. And there's considerations for physical media. The more I talk about this, the more of a logistical nightmare it actually sounds like. So, whatever. That said, console releases being separate from the Steam release stuff is always kind of weird. Anyway, Borderlands 4 is out now. I reviewed it. My general sentiment on it is that it is better than Borderlands 3, but that's a very low bar. It's still a game with I think it's a game that I think feels old in a lot of ways, and doesn't necessarily feel like it has moved forward into time. It just feels stuck. Borderlands 4 feels stuck. They added the ability to grapple and do double jump air dash type stuff, but the game doesn't move fast enough for it to feel like a movement shooter or anything. Like it just feels bleh. And so, there's certainly a lot of room for nuance there, but a lot of the conversation after the release of Borderlands 4 has been around its technical performance or lack thereof, especially on PC. It sounds like the console versions, it is not out on Switch 2 just yet. That is an early October release date for whatever, they're not done with it yet. And so that version is coming along in a few weeks here, but it is out on console. It sounds like the what I've read and saw a couple videos of it, it's generally a 30 frames per second sort of game. Sometimes you're getting a little bit higher than that, but I would not want to play this game at 30 frames per second. I barely want to play it at 60. So, but at least the console performance sounds like it's relatively stable. On PC, it's been a real crapshoot, and it's come at a time when I feel like the conversation around Unreal Engine 5 and optimization of games and how much or how little developers are doing that these days, and there's a larger conversation happening that Borderlands 4 I think is right in the center of, and the people at Gearbox or 2K, I mean, who owns Gearbox now. Remember, this is also the first Borderlands game that has shipped since 2K, since Gearbox went to Embracer and went away from Embracer and got bought by 2K, and presumably all of the Gearbox people are either employees of or contracted to 2K and not just out there freewheeling on their own. And it makes me wonder, like if the game shipped a little faster, like on a slightly faster schedule than maybe they had originally thought it was going to or something. Not that the game necessarily feels rushed. I just remember, because there was a time when Gearbox was an independent entity and they were working with 2K to publish. 2K was publishing Borderlands, and the and 2K owned part of the Borderlands IP, I guess, but they couldn't really do anything without Gearbox. And I remember hearing, and this is like second or third hand, so consider that, I guess. But that 2K really didn't like a lot of things about the way Gearbox operated and presented itself, and how its leadership would be on social media, and just a lot of stuff around that of just like, man, just get the game done, get the game done so we can market it. Like, what are we doing? And so I remember thinking when 2K finally acquired Gearbox and kind of closed that loop, I was like, oh, okay, let's see how it goes. Randy Pitchford is out on Twitter, not helping, not. Let's back up. The game itself, I have had fewer technical issues on the PC than I suppose a lot of other people have. I am on a significantly overpowered PC for what these what these system requirements seem to be listing. I have a 5090 in this machine, though I've also played a chunk of it on a 4090. CPU's kind of clearing the bar on both ends as well. I have an Intel and an AMD CPU that I've been messing with it with. And so I've been playing the game with pretty much everything turned up and running it at 1440p because that is the preferred resolution of demons. And 4K is for suckers. But actually, I kind of in a backwards way, I played it at 4K on the 4090 because that's what's hooked up to this TV behind me. And I played it at 1440 on the 5090 here on a monitor that can do 360 hertz and all that other cool stuff. For me, the biggest problem has been around shader compilation. It's been like shader stutter is kind of the kind of common issue that that the game has had. And it's been bad. So in the week prior to the game's release, when reviewers had it and were playing it, they pushed out a few different patches. And if you've ever played Call of Duty, like I feel like Call of Duty is maybe the most noticeable, but a lot of games do this. Any game that like puts up a screen that says, hey, we're compiling shaders, you tend to know that if you update your video card driver or whatever, that you're going to see that shader compiling screen again. Or if the game patches, for example. So they patched the game a few times as they were getting their day one patch in line for launch and whatever else. And so I got to experience the magic of loading into the middle of the game with no shaders compiled, because it had a shader compilation step on launch. And most of this is in the video. Like the video I put up has like all of that in there. It's shader compiling and all of that stuff if you want to see it. So it would throw up a screen and say, hey, we're compiling shaders. But then you would get in game and it would have to compile them again. It was like it was only compiling them for the beginning of the game, but I had a character 20 hours in. And so I would load into an area and it would stutter. It would be working in the background to compile these shaders. And I guess, shaders are, graphical effects in a game. And so sometimes you're programming, if you're developing a game, you're programming these custom shaders that might only be seen once or twice, depending on what you're showing in the game. It might be something like, oh, here's the shader for this gun's explosions. And so the minute someone gets one of those guns, the game might stutter a little bit while it goes, oh, we need to show that explosion now. You need to compile this on the fly and go. So it's compiling a ton of things on the fly about the environment around you, your character's feet, your character's guns, your character, whatever. It's got to compile all of that stuff. And it's trying to do it as fast as possible, but it's doing it while you're playing the game. And so that sucks. It makes it unplayable for a brief period of time, but then it's done. And it's sort of a one-time thing until the game gets patched or you update your video card drivers, and then that whole cache of shaders it compiled on the fly gets dumped, and it does it all over again because they may have changed. And that's modern gaming. Unreal Engine 5 is generating a pretty bad rep over the last chunk of time here for this kind of shader stutter as these things compile on the fly, and Borderlands 4 feels like a very outsized example of this problem, because you would have it compiling shaders for a minute or so before it would even let you see the main menu, and then you would get into game and it would be a slideshow for a minute or so while it's looking around and it's compiling everything. But then as you move through the game, when you get to the next new area, especially if you're moving fast on a vehicle, if you're boosting into a new zone, for example, because there's like, oh, here's the snow area, here's the desert. If you're going from the desert into the snow, the minute you see snow, it goes, oh shit, and stops again. It goes while it figures out what snow is supposed to look like. It's a very normal thing. Games do it all the time. But it's bad. You know, it's not a good situation to be in. That said, you know, I played most of the game without that issue because, again, once it compiles all of that stuff, it's not a big deal. It wasn't until they started pushing out patches, because then it's like, okay, well, now I'm here doing this, and now I need to fast travel across the world to turn in a quest. So you're loading into the game, it's stutter, 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 it smooths out, you go to fast travel, you fast travel somewhere else, the teleport takes forever, another compiling shader bar appears on the teleporting screen, you get there, and then it's bad for a while too, on top of that, stutter, 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 and then it smooths out, and then you're gaming, baby. And so that was largely my experience with Borderlands 4. It's like, here's this kind of, it's a known problem that a lot of games have, but this has it in a pretty extreme way. And it's something that, you know, was exacerbated by a couple of patches that they pushed out in the wake of, you know, so I was like 2/3 of the way through the game, and then they pushed out a patch, and then I had to go through all of that again. And then as it was getting to where it was smooth again, there was another patch and it dumped cache again, and it, you know, kind of went through that whole thing. So it's the sort of thing that, you know, once the game is settled and drivers and all that other stuff, you may notice it once, and it will not be a problem. And so by and large, my experience was not sullied by this, but it was extremely noticeable when it happened. And so that has been my technical problem with the game. That is not the same as what has led to it getting like mixed reviews on Steam. It's certainly a contributing factor. I'd say that people are seeing this and some people are not knowing what it is, and they're going like, why does this run like garbage? It's why, like, dude. So they put out these graphs and charts for people with AMD graphics cards and people with NVIDIA graphics cards, and the charts are way too small when they embedded them on Steam. You can't even read them, and so they had to update it again to like put the charts into text form in there on top of that. And the recommendations they're making based on your GPU are like truly fucking crazy to me. Because they are like, the recommendations on their chart for how you should set up their game. It'd be like, okay, set this to far distance, set this to, like, individual settings should be set this way based on your GPU. They're not saying anything about CPU, which I think is weird. But like, their recommendations are to always use DLSS on an NVIDIA card, which I think is fine. I think DLSS is generally fine. Some people are still under the impression, and I think at like lower settings on lower powered systems, like, you know, it can make things look blurry and so on. I think that it's actually that stuff has mostly been fine in a lot of games. If you're trying to blow things up to 4K, that you know, you may notice it a little bit more. But again, at 1440p, that has not been a big deal. For me, the thing that I find to be bananas and says that they made this chart just to get a number up. None of this is about making the game play right. This to me is about trying to get the frame number up, even at the expense of the feel of the game. So their recommendations for anyone on a 40 series or 50 series GPU is to turn on frame generation. Which frame generation is basically, it is using whatever neural stuff on the GPU to generate fake frames. So it'll take real frames and insert fake frames between them to kind of smooth things out. It's neat technology. It's kind of cool in a weird way. However, it induces latency. It can make the game feel worse because obviously you can't control a game when a fake frame is being shown. And so you end up in a situation where if you push that too far, the game starts to feel worse. The thing I'll say as a 5090 owner, I have not found the 5090 to be like an amazing upgrade from the 4090. For games on the video encoding front, it's been really cool. It's been fucking kind of awesome, but I'm using it right now to broadcast this stream. But I will say in the 50 series cards, on the 5090 specifically, I am now able to turn on 2 times frame generation, 2x. So it will insert one fake frame between every frame. And the latency hit is not especially noticeable in most games. On the 40 series cards, that was not the experience. On the 40 series cards, anytime I turned on frame gen, the game felt like shit. And so it was just a bad option. They have gotten better at doing it. And so 2x frame gen on an NVIDIA card, I have found to be okay in a lot of games. I'm not sure that I would trust it in a competitive game, but like I'm lining up headshots, it's feeling the way it's supposed to feel. After I made I had to turn that to 2x. And then also I had to turn the dead zones way down on the controllers because like by default, it just looked fucking terrible. Like it just felt like the controller felt bad out of the box. But they are recommending that anyone with a 50 series card turn on 4x frame gen, which I think means they can insert up to 3 fake frames before every real frame or after every real frame. And that's crazy. So I, over the course of reviewing the game, the new video card drivers came out, specifically with like, oh, this is for Borderlands 4, and it didn't make a big noticeable change on that front or whatever. But it also, like the NVIDIA app, like I think what happened is the NVIDIA app optimized in fucking big air quotes here, the game for what their recommended settings were. And as part of that process, it turned on 4x frame gen without telling me. And so I'm in the middle of reviewing the game, and, you know, like I'm shooting people in the head with a shotgun for hours and 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 hours. Because that's that game. Do you like shooting guys in the head and then shooting them again because the one headshot didn't kill them? How about would you like to unload a submachine gun into an enemy's face for 10 seconds or more while you watch their health bar tick away slowly? Welcome to Borderlands 4. That's the Borderlands 4 experience. It turned on 4-time frame gen, and I was missing every headshot. The whole game felt like molasses. It felt like shit all of a sudden, and I didn't know why. I'm like, am I just playing bad? Am I tired? I am tired. Is it because I'm tired? What's going on? Am I just bad at this? Like, what the hell is going on? And then I just randomly dipped into the menu and noticed, like, oh, you turned this on. Like something, you know, whether it was like the game when the game patched or the video card driver, like some optimization, somewhere along the way, 4 times frame gen got turned on and the game felt like garbage. So the idea that they are recommending this for everyone on a 50 series card, I think is straight up irresponsible. I think it is something that, again, is them trying to paper over their bad frame rate issues in ways that will make the game feel noticeably worse. And I think that's really crazy. And I think that's it's like a bad precedent. Like it's just bad top to bottom, man. It's a really messed up way for them to go. And so this chart of them going like, okay, you can set the DLSS to quality no matter what GPU you got. And if you want this, then set it to high distance or this to very high. And then they've got all of these hoops for you to jump through at different resolutions for, you know, whatever you want to, you know, whatever you want to try to do whether you're running at 4K or you're running at 1440p. They have different recommendations and all this other stuff, and it's a lot. It's a lot. It's like settings for every single setting. It's a lot to have to sit there and go through. And so clearly there's work to be done, right? I would say I would look at that and go like, well, that's something that, this game, this is not the first game in the world to ship in an imperfect state, in a state of not being as optimized as it probably needs to be. And ideally, they will keep working on it, and they will chip away at this problem as best they can. And then enter Randy Pitchford, the CEO of Gearbox, the studio that made Borderlands. There's a way to handle this, right? There's a way to talk about this as it's happening. And I think it's not entirely unlike the way I just spoke about it, right? Like, hey, there's still work to be done, like we're still, it sounds like some people are not having the intended experience, and so we're continuing to work on it. We're trying to identify if there's a common issue here, and we'll keep working on it. Contact customer support if you want some specific help or whatever. That would be a way you could talk about this. Instead, he's out there saying things like, and these are great headlines that, like, from PC Gamer, like, Windows Central, like multiple outlets are kind of picking up on this because it's just so. Borderlands 4 is a premium game made for premium gamers. If you're trying to drive a monster truck with a leaf blower's motor, you're going to be disappointed. And so he's kind of turning this back onto people and saying, like, yeah, if you have a PC that's like, like 4 years old, you can't expect to run it at the highest specs. Like, I don't know what which like is at the highest specs, I suppose, is true, right? I think the problem, it's not necessarily that, people need to run it at the highest specs and they have older hardware. It's that people are having trouble getting it to run at an acceptable frame rate, period. Or at a consistent one, because, it's not just that it isn't hitting the frames the way it needs to be. It's like, oh, hey, this is like all over the place between the shader stutter and everything else. Like, this game is running, inconsistently. But like the way he is out there talking about it is that he's just assuming that everyone is turning it all the way up and running it at 4K. So he's saying, like, I know a lot of you are dead set on playing at 4K with ultra max settings and using 2 or 3 year old hardware. You do you. But Borderlands 4 and Unreal Engine 5 are doing a lot. And for me, that trade-off for frames isn't worth it. I play at 1440p with settings super high, and I'm super happy with it. He said, code your own engine and show us how it's done, please. Like, there's just a good chunk of quotes here from him, like, as he is posting through it, if you will, that's just like, dude, fucking stop. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Code your own engine and show us how it's done, please. We will be your customer when you pull it off. The people doing it now are clearly dumb and don't know what they're doing. And all the support and recommendations and code and architecture from the world's greatest hardware companies and tech companies working with the world's greatest real-time graphics engine coders don't know what you seem to know. /sarcasm. Great. Thanks for putting the sarcasm tag in there. Fun facts, customer service reports for Borderlands 4 are roughly at 1% or so of installs. Using that simple rounded ratio, more than half the tickets, meaning 0.55% of customers, are users reporting difficulty with their Shift accounts, like lost emails and access, etc. The next highest ticket is about FOV controls on console. We're working on it. Which he reluctantly even admitted that they were working on it, because at first he was like, oh, that might impact fairness in a mode I can't talk about yet. Meanwhile, the PC version already has FOV controls. What the fuck are you talking about? Next, 0.055% of customers are reporting issues with Twitch drops, and 0.04% of customers are PC performance related, with customer service flagging 0.009% as valid. 0.037% have experienced success with education, and then in parentheses, settings coaching. Yes, coach us through your settings. We're too stupid to figure out how to run your game, Randy. Oh, I'm so dumb. I'm not one of the world's greatest. If only I could code my own engine. You're right. It's fucking crazy. Okay, on top of that, the idea that people are going to go and file a customer service ticket because the game doesn't run right, like that's a thing people do. I mean, maybe you could argue that perhaps more people should. But that's not a common thing. You go to the Steam reviews, you refund the game on Steam, perhaps. You get it out of your life and you move on. And so I feel like using customer service percentages, like imagine being the person in customer service that like gets the email from Randy Pitchford going like, how many people are complaining? What's the percentages? Or maybe it's already in a report and they don't have to do it, but like having to like fund the data for his social media war like is just fucking crazy, dude. Just not not the way. Eurogamer, who also has spent more time digging through his social media than I'm willing to do, said that Randy Pitchford referred to Borderlands 4 as being pretty darn optimal and that people shouldn't expect to be able to run it in huge resolutions at max settings and get incredible frame rates. Every PC gamer must accept the reality of the relationship between their hardware and what the software they are running is doing. We have made an amazing and fun and huge looter shooter campaign game. The game is pretty damn optimal, which means that the software is doing what we want without wasteful cycles on bad processes. With Borderlands 4, every PC gamer has a lot of tools to balance their preferences between frame rate, resolution, and rendering features. If you aren't happy with the balance between those things you are experiencing, please tune to your preferences using the tools available to you. I guess this is maybe the right point to bring it in and say Borderlands 4 doesn't look amazing. It doesn't look like it is dramatically beyond Borderlands 3 graphically. It doesn't look dramatically better. You're not looking at it going like, oh my God, this is the future of gaming. It's like, here you go. It's the new Borderlands. Okay, it just kind of looks like how it looks, man. It's the same basic style. It's the same basic, like, you know, these models don't look like they're animated. In fact, I think a lot of the animation on the models and the way they kind of pop in and out of, like from idle animation to now I have to do a thing for a quest, the way that the NPCs in this game animate looks straight off the 360. You know, it's like, I don't know, like, yeah, it's the lighting, you know, sure. It's I'm not going to say it is not technologically more advanced than Borderlands 3 because I'm not really in a position to make that call. But like, if you're asking me, do I think it looks like dramatically better? Like, no, absolutely not. So to talk about the 3 points he made here, that it is amazing, fun, and huge. Amazing? No, I think that's a big stretch. Fun, you know, that's relative, I guess. Sure, I don't know. Like I played a bunch of it. So I wrote the review after I had finished the campaign and did like kind of the onboarding. They do it like an onboarding for the end game kind of post game stuff where you can enable different difficulty settings the same way like Diablo does it with like Torment 5 and so they have like a similar concept in there. So I went through that process. Since I wrote all that stuff, I played a little bit more. There are like Borderlands vaults that you can find. You find key pieces around the world and you can open up vaults. I did one of those. And so I think I've touched every single thing that game tries to do. I did not get to the 5th and final difficulty setting, and I don't think I will. But I feel like I've, you know, in the 40-ish hours I've spent with this game, I feel like I can speak to it pretty well at this point. And I think they made another Borderlands game. Huge is the last one, he says. That is honestly a problem with the game, is that it is a gigantic empty world with jack fuck to do in it half the time. And not enough fast travel points to skip over it. So you're left driving through these empty roads, and occasionally there's some enemies off to the side, and you could stop and fight them, but fucking why? Just keep driving, keep following the arrow until you get to where you're going. Like, it's really Like, that is something that I think could be tighter and better about the game. And so if part of this is because they're trying to render some massive world, which I don't, you have to go compare it to Borderlands 3's size or something like that if you really wanted to have this conversation, but I don't think that the size benefits it in any way. Maybe after years of DLC and that sort of stuff, they'll take better advantage of the space that they have and make better use of the world or something. But like, as it stands right now, between the small handful of world events and the vaults and some of the other post-game stuff, like, there's just a lot of this that just feels mindless, like very like aimless. Like, why is this world as big as it is? Like, the game is not better for it. In fact, the game is like actually worse for its size in some significant ways. So, whatever. I just like my thing here is like, I think the game has performance issues. I think that it probably needs some work in that department. If it can, I mean, he's saying it's pretty damn optimal, so maybe it's just fucked like this forever, and that's the game, right? If what he's saying is true, then no help is coming, right? It's just up to you to hit sliders and hope you can find something you could live with, I guess. That said, I didn't have problems with frame rates, with DLSS turned on and even with frame gen turned off. Turned off and turned to 2x. I was, satisfied with the performance on this machine, but again, this machine is, what is it? It's like a 5090 and then like a 14.7, whatever fucking Intel. One of the Intel CPUs that people are always worried is going to be on fire, but they have issued enough BIOS updates that hopefully it won't burn to the ground. So I think the response here is either like, again, if we're taking what he says at face value here and saying the game is pretty damn optimal, which means that the software is doing what we want without wasteful cycles on bad processes. If there's no further optimization coming, then you should refund the game if you're not happy with how it runs. If you can't find an acceptable middle ground for it, get your money back. Like, that to me is the message of what he is saying there. I suspect that there probably is more that could be done to get this game to run better, and more they could be doing, especially, as you turn some of the settings down, things that they could be reducing or turning off or whatever. How much you sacrifice in visual quality or whatever may vary in your own personal preferences there. Like, this weird, like, level of detail looking stuff with some of the foliage and, there's some really funky stuff there. As well that I encountered that just kind of looked weird, where like the area about 30 feet around me was completely flat and then the distance was showing foliage. Really strange. Usually it's the opposite of that or something, right? And maybe that's been patched. I saw that last week before the game was out, but yeah, I don't know. People are not happy, and I think that like it's my curiosity here is like, think about it this way. At this point now, this studio is owned by 2K. This is not an independent studio where the head of this independent studio can say whatever he wants and do what he wants, and there's zero repercussions, and some partners might be angry, but if they want to do business with him, that's what they have to put up with. And you think about it a lot as like, well, Randy's going to be Randy, but now Randy is going to be Randy, and Randy is going to answer to 2K in a more direct way, I assume, unless he's on some very strange employment arrangement or, contractual thing. But like, this is now 2K's property, and I can't imagine 2K is fucking stoked about this situation being the way it is now. It would have been very easy to say, we've seen some reports about, about some performance stuff and some of the shader compilation, and we're looking into it, and have that be that. And hey, we're looking into it. Here's some shift keys. Like, I don't, which he also has been posting shift keys. And so I just, at some point you're just like, this is not helpful. This is starting to dominate conversation. I guess I'll also say I have not seen a ton of conversation about the game, period, except for this. It feels like the only conversations happening kind of in the wider online space. I'm sure if you go find a Borderlands specific area, you're going to have people going like, well, I thought that this build was better than this build, you know, like doing that sort of stuff. But the only things I have seen are people complaining about performance and sponsored people talking about like Borderlands 4 is out, like people in front of microphones like this talking about how Borderlands 4 is out and it's amazing and it's the best Borderlands yet, and like all of that sort of shit. So I don't know. Like it's just seems like a bad way to go. You know, you shipped a game that people are you know, not able, like, even if people want to like it, you know, there are plenty of people that want to like. I went into this game very much wanting to like it as someone who has had a fun time with Borderlands games in the past. Like, these are people that are dissatisfied with the performance, but because they want to play it. And so I feel like to have like multi-tweet tirades about how you need to fucking change your settings is like treating some of your customers like shit. Now, I will grant you that sometimes people on social media deserve to be treated like shit. It's social media. A lot of these people are fucking garbage, and that's just kind of how it goes in this day and age. But this just seems like a bad way to go. I don't know. Like, it just, like, the game is I will say I feel like Borderlands 4 is fine. Do I think it has some issues? Of course. Do I think that like there could have been some more dramatic changes made to it and whatever? Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think that sort of stuff, you know, could have been handled better across the board, and to have all of this conversation around the performance of the game, which is a very real concern, and you know, the shader stutter and everything else, like, you know, you do start to wonder, are people leaning on Unreal Engine 5 in ways that it was not meant to be used, or is it just is Unreal Engine 5 bad at some things? The shader stutter thing has been an ongoing conversation. It's just that Borderlands 4 is a very extreme example of it. And so I, you know, this kind of goes back to this was all in my head as Tim Sweeney was being quoted in Korea as saying, you know, developers need to be better at optimizing their games for lower end systems, and that's the problem. Like, Borderlands 4 fits the description of what he was talking about pretty well, I think. But again, if we take Randy Pitchford at his word here, there's not a lot of optimization left to be done, which is troubling. But that's a decision they made. Is that decision worth it? Like, you know, you can always target high-end hardware. Their recommended and minimal specs don't really sound like they did. I mean, you know, like they're not low specs, but they're not crazy. But like, I don't know, man. It's a really strange sort of, it's a really strange scenario here that I don't really know what the answer is to it, because it doesn't really feel like that they targeted a high-end hardware in a way that is noticeable visually. Like, again, I'm not coming away from this going like, wow, I sure am glad I spent all that money on a high-end graphics card, because, you know, really all I'm getting is like, oh, once the shader stutter is done, the game runs fine. Like, that's the nicest thing I can say about it technically. Is like, once it's done running like garbage, it runs great. You know? Like, that's a bad spot to be in with your high-end hardware or whatever. So to say that like, oh, this is doing a lot on the GPU and the CPU, and this is Unreal Engine and Borderlands, they're doing a lot, like, the game doesn't look like that. The game does not come across like the players, I don't think, are seeing the benefit of whatever it is you did under the hood to make it so demanding, because it doesn't seem like it is all that demanding. that's I guess my overall thought on Borderlands 4 is it's just like, I don't know, they made another thing and I don't know. I wish it was more. I don't know. There's like cool moments where you're like, oh, I did a sideways dash and then I jumped up and did the grappling. I happened to be in one of the right spots where there was a grappling hook target and that flung me over here and I was able to turn around and shoot this guy and I double jumped up here. Like, you can kind of put those things together, but it feels like you're running at like 30% speed or something compared to like when you think about games that have those sorts of movement options and how fast they move generally. Like, think about like Doom, how fast Doom feels like it's moving, even if it's like a lot of it's the head bob and sound effects and whatever else that make it feel like you're going crazy. Like, this should be a game where you feel like you're just fucking going off, but it's stuck in the mud, man. It's stuck in first gear. They bolted on the parts that let you whip yourself around the level a little bit more, but didn't piece together any faster movement or anything else like that. And so they talk about it like, oh, it's the most mobile Borderlands yet. And you're like, yeah, that's true. I would not call it an especially mobile game. Like, it is not a mobility shooter. It is not a, like, it's just bleh. And I think they could do more with it. I think they could do a lot more with it. That's always been my frustrating take on Borderlands is, man, it really just feels like there's a much better game here. A much better game here hiding under the surface. But like, generally, I think separate from whatever weird fucking meltdown is happening online, like, it's fine. Whatever. Do you want to play a new Borderlands game? If you're in that market, they made another one of those and you'll be like, cool, man. And, if you're like a normal person of sound mind, you will say, wow, this is better than the last one. I said that. I said, oh man. So like when the review embargo was up, I was like, oh, well, I mean, it's better than Borderlands 3. And like, there's always going to be like 2 or 3 people like, I really liked Borderlands 3. And I'm like, fucking go with God, man. Have fucking fun with that, I guess. Maybe you'll love this. This will be your favorite game. Get your cosplay shit together, man. There's 4 new idiots to look like. Let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk about something else after this. Fall is here. And, depending on where you are, that might mean that things are cooling off a little bit. Not here. It is hot as ever, and I think it's going to stay that way for at least the next month and a half. But I can't wait for it to cool off. The nice news is that no matter what the temperature is, MeUndies is ready for you. If it's hot out and you need something that's going to be, a little moisture wicking and help let things breathe, MeUndies and its micro-modal fabric is ready for you. But as things cool down a little bit and you're wearing flannels and longer pants, jeez, and all that other stuff in layers, MeUndies is ready for you as well. They can be cozy, perfect for crisp mornings, chilly nights, and everything in between. And on top of that, just in time for spook season, MeUndies has limited edition Halloween prints. Fun, festive, and they've got glow-in-the-dark underwear so you can bring the spooky vibes underneath it all. They've got a cut for every butt with over 20 different styles in 100 different colors and prints. Yes, they are comfortable no matter what you are doing. If you're out and you're picking up pumpkins, moisture wicking technology, anti-odor technology, stay a little fresher, a little longer, nice. They use sustainably sourced materials. They work with partners that care for their workers. And if you're not happy with your first pair of undies, it's on MeUndies. With more than 30 million pairs sold and 90,000 five-star reviews, MeUndies are an essential summer must-have for every drawer. And fall as well. These have been very nice. They sent over a few pairs of these. They have very quickly become my favorite underwear. I should take all these, you probably have, you got a bunch of blown out boxer shorts that are just like a few years too old. And you're like, I should be wiping a car with these or something. I don't know. What am I shouldn't be putting them on my body. MeUndies. Start replacing the nightmare underwear in your drawer with spooky Halloween styles. Right now, since you can hear my voice, you can get cozy and spooky with deals up to 50% off at MeUndies.com/Jeff and enter the promo code Jeff. That's MeUndies.com/Jeff. Promo code Jeff for up to 50% off. MeUndies, comfort that's made for fall. The Virtual Boy is in the news. Boy, what the hell, man? Nintendo ran a Nintendo Direct last week with a bunch of information about upcoming games. They put a date on Metroid Prime 4. That date is December 4th. They put out DLC for Donkey Kong Bonanza, including like a run-based rogue light mode that I have installed but have not. You have to finish the game in order to do that stuff, and I'm right at the end of the game. My kids lost interest in Donkey Kong Bonanza. They we were playing a lot of it, or I guess I was playing a lot of it, and they were watching me, and I think they got tired of watching games and started wanting to play them more. And Donkey Kong was not doing it for them. Got very close to the end, and I do know how the game ends, which I think also kind of robbed me of some of the desire to finish it, because of the strings they try to pull on stuff near the end. But yeah, they have added a new island that is like kind of a it's Donkey Kong Isle, so it's like a throwback to some of the other kind of bad mid-period Donkey Kong stuff. You know, your Donkey Kong Countries, your DK64s, like that rough period. That rough period where Rare was making, the developers of Banjo-Tooie, everyone's favorite video game. That stuff. So that's not that is not super interesting to me at all. And so them kind of leaning on that, it's a bummer. I don't know, to me the exciting thing was like, oh man, they're redesigning Donkey Kong, they're kind of putting him in this new context with his new cool kid that she's singing her heart out, and like establishing this big new thing. And so I think to like rein it back in, to like tie it to all of this other stuff that you could have kind of cut ties on, and just, regardless of how you feel about the quality of that stuff, right? A lot of people do like that stuff because people are dumb. This would be a great opportunity to kind of close the book on that and open something brand new. And they do a really good job. Like, Donkey Kong Bonanza is a great video game. And I think that stuff is kind of frustrating, that they kind of hedged there a little bit with some of this stuff. But it is what it is. I also don't know that I like a run-based, go get all these emeralds and do these runs to get these emeralds in different levels, and the locations don't change, so you can optimize your run to figure out the best way to get the most of the... Like, the pitch on that just doesn't sound super appealing to me. Like, that doesn't sound like something I want to do, I guess. So finishing the game and going and doing that stuff, like no part of that sounds like something I'm like super excited to do, which is a shame because I do love this. I do love smashing. I do love splashing. Yes. Playing is for pleasure. They announced, while we're on the subject of things Nintendo could announce, they also are making a new Yoshi game. Yoshi and the Mysterious Book is coming out next year. They're putting out DLC and a Switch 2 update for Super Mario Wonder, which is kind of neat. They're making a Mario Tennis game that'll be out next year called Mario Tennis Fever. They were holding this event right around the 40th anniversary of Super Mario Brothers. And so everyone was wondering, like, what are they going to do with Mario? What's going to happen with Mario? They announced the official title of the second Super Mario movie, confirming it will be called the Super Mario Galaxy Movie. And they're going to release Galaxy and Galaxy 2. That'll be in a bundle for $70, but you can buy each game individually for like $40. And so if you want to replay the Galaxy games, they'll be putting those out in some capacity here next month. Some third-party stuff. Hades got a date. That's out end of September. Obviously, that's on a zillion platforms. I think this is also where they confirmed the date for Mortal Kombat, right? That's end of October. There's going to be a Suika game sequel out this year. They're remaking Dragon Quest VII. Dragon Quest VII Reimagined will be out in February, Dragon Quest VII was such a big deal when it came out, even though the Dragon Quest franchise hadn't really, I don't know, like maybe it wasn't a huge deal here in the US, but like I remember when that game was coming out on the PlayStation, how insane it seemed, like the fervor for it. It was probably the first Dragon Quest game that I was like covering the video game industry day to day when Dragon Quest VII was coming out. And so it was the first release of one of those that I was kind of, you know, not necessarily on the front lines for, but I was in the game or whatever. And I remember being blown away by how big of a deal that seemed in Japan. And that's when I learned all the stuff about like, oh, they, you know, it's, I think the some of the stuff is maybe a little overblown or overstated, but that was when I first heard the idea that like, oh, they legally have to release Dragon Quest games on the weekend because kids were skipping school and people were leaving work to go get Dragon Quest games. They're making amiibo for Kirby Air Riders and they're like $50, which is that's too much. I don't know. You want like a cool looking Kirby? I feel like you could get a cooler looking Kirby for $50 than an amiibo. You know, it's just kind of, I don't know, man. I heard so people in chat are asking about the Dragon Quest thing, but like that was stated as fact then. Like, oh yeah, like Japan decreed that you cannot release a Dragon Quest game during the week because it fucks up so much stuff, and you know, like people go wait in line or whatever it is. And the truth of it is muddier than, like, that's not quite the case. There's stuff around it, and the popularity is certainly legitimate, right? Like Dragon Quest is a huge franchise, or at least it was there. I feel like maybe it's cooled off in the years ahead because they haven't necessarily hit it the same way that they used to. But the Dragon Quest VII, you know, like when that came out, there was a lot of like, are they going to localize this because they skipped so many games here in the US that didn't come out, and this and that. You know, there's just a lot of stuff like that where that game seemed like a very big deal and then kind of wasn't coming out for a long time, and you know, it's sort of a weird anyway, they're going to do this remake in February, which I think is cool. You know, a lot of people haven't played that game, and it always seemed like such a huge deal that even I saw that announcement and I was like, oh fuck yeah, like I should fucking play Dragon Quest VII finally. Holy shit. Like, yeah, man. I don't know if I will, but like that's super interesting to me, you know, historically, because that was such a big deal when it came out, but it was a big deal in another country, and so it just was like, you know, you're kind of covering it as this cultural thing, and you know, not necessarily the game itself. But there's a new Pokemon that kind of is a called Pokemon Pokopia that Koei Tecmo is doing, and That game kind of looks like a Dragon Quest Builders sort of thing, except you're playing as a Ditto who looks like a person, and that's fucked up. I'm sorry, that's fucked up. But the big news out of the Nintendo Direct is that on February 17th, 2026, according to a write-up from your friends at videogameschronicle.com, who recently ranked the top 40 Mario games, they put their heads together and came up with a list of the top 40 Mario platformers, and Super Mario Brothers Special was not on the list. And I'm really confused. I feel, I don't know, betrayed. Like, these people seem like they know what they're talking. They seem like they know games. And then I see this list, and now I'm like, I don't know. 14 Virtual Boy games will be released for the Switch and Switch 2 over time, they say. There's like 22 in all, so presumably some of them they couldn't find the rights to, or whatever else. But they're going to put Virtual Boy games onto the Switch as part of the kind of class. You're not going to buy these separately. It's another kind of like, hey, you're subscribed to our thing. It is coming to the expansion pack tier, so you have to have paid for the expensive version of their online stuff in order to get access to this. They are also going to make a shell for the Switch and Switch 2 that you can put it into, that will have lenses so you can look into it like it was a real Virtual Boy, and I guess see it in 3D the way it was originally released. If you're not familiar with the Virtual Boy, it was a set of goggles. It was not a VR headset. It was a thing you looked into, and it was a 3D image. It was a 3D image, and it would, it was all red. It would only produce one color, and that color was red, and shades of red generally. And it was a miserable failure. They put out a game called Teleroboxer that in some ways is kind of a Mike Tyson's Punch-Out sort of deal. I remember being at, I guess this would have been CES. This would have been before E3, because the Virtual Boy came out in 1995. People in chat are... Wait, okay, so I'm sorry. I was under the assumption that you could play the Virtual Boy games just kind of as is in a 2D mode, but some people in the chat are saying that you will... Yeah, okay, no. This new story says it will be required. You are forced to have an add-on, and there are two versions of the add-on. One is made of cardboard. And then there is a full-on plastic shell you can get and put it in there. The shell is $100. So, yes, as part of your subscription, you get 14 Virtual Boy games. But I guess in order to play them, you either need to spend like $30 on the cardboard version or $100 on a fake Virtual Boy to put a Switch or Switch 2 into. Look, I played the Virtual Boy quite a bit before it was out because they had it at CES, in the months leading up to its release, and it was even then, even at a time when Nintendo was releasing a new platform, which should have seemed like the biggest deal in the world, the Virtual Boy was off to the side in their booth. It was not a huge presence as a part of their booth. It was like, and here's the Virtual Boy. It's the new thing we're working on. You can play Teleroboxer right here, right now, or Mario Clash, or, like whatever the handful of, they had, I think, 2 or 3 different games on display there. But Teleroboxer was the big one. Teleroboxer was the one at CES that year that was like, okay, the fists are like coming right at me. This is nuts. But I remember walking away from testing it out and playing some of those games then, before the system came out, and being like, dude, this thing's fucking disgusting. It's like a sick joke. Or what's wrong with you? Like, are you crazy? Like, these games are like these weird all red Game Boy games with no backgrounds because the 3D works better that way. Like, it was just, it was bad. It's not to say that those games aren't interesting and that some of them aren't cool, but like it didn't fail because they didn't know how to market it. It didn't fail because they just, they didn't have the, if they had one or two more games, like, it just was a bad way to play games. And then it came out and it was like, I want to say it was pretty expensive. It was like $189 or something like that. Like, it was too much money at the time. And it just seemed like a bad deal all around. And I remember being like, on top of everything else, being like, dude, this is like, wait, I can't just strap it to my face. Like, it comes on a little kickstand, and you would set it on a table, and you would lean forward and look into it and squint into it that way to see it. And some people would lay down with it on there, and lay it on their face, which I guess is a way to go. I love it. I love that they're doing this because it's one of the weirder moves. Like, at a time when a lot of people are saying, boy, Nintendo sure does keep doing the safest shit in the world. The Switch 2 sure is the most boring thing they could have made. Yeah, well, now they're going to make $100 plastic shell for you to fucking plug your Switch 2 into so you can play Virtual Boy games. So you can play Jack Brothers. Jack Brothers in the building! It's great. There are very few ways to play the Virtual Boy the way it was originally intended to be played, because the Virtual Boy is a very strange, like, on top of that, it has a weird controller. It was a controller with 2 D-pads on either side, and buttons and shoulders, and so it's a weird thing to emulate. In fact, I don't think that the Switch 2 controllers will be an amazing way to play these games. It'll be functional, I'm sure. I wonder if you'll use the shoulder buttons, if you'll use the 2 D-pad. Well, a lot of games don't use both D-pads on top of that, so it's like, so good on them for doing this, because it's ridiculous, and you can go play like Red Alarm or whatever, and whatever the list of games that they I had that image of the available games. They did put out an image with all the box art for all the stuff, and it's like, it's Tetris and V-Tetris, and it's Galactic Pinball, which is a terrible game. Like, a lot of these games are not good. You need to know that going in. You need to know going in that a lot of these games are not good, and I think even Teleroboxer, which I think is a game that it kind of gets the some of the lion's share of discussion around it. Like, it's not a great game. The Mario game, like, they're not. They're worth taking a look at. It's the sort of thing that I feel like you should be able to look at without having to spend any money on cardboard or a plastic shell or anything. And so I'm kind of weirded out that they're not going to let you play these in a 2D mode or in some kind of 2D format. I think that's really strange that they're going to require you to buy the accessory. But I guess, without the accessory, like, there's really nothing there, without it being in 3D, without the novelty of that thing. Like, most of the games don't stand on their own. And so maybe that's kind of the right move. I bought a Virtual Boy on the cusp of them discontinuing it, which did not take long. But all the KB Toys locations I think they were going out of business around the same time. Like, KB was going under, and the Virtual Boy had failed to make a dent in the market. And so I bought a brand new Virtual Boy on clearance for like $30 or something, and bought a handful of games, at the same time, because they were just blowing that shit out, trying to get it off the shelves. It's neat that they're doing this. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous that they're doing this, and that's maybe my favorite part about it. But if you're asking for like an actual recommendation, like, hey, should you go and buy this stuff? Like, do you are these going to be like great games that you're going to be excited to see? Like, I really don't think so. I really don't think that most of these games are good enough to warrant that expenditure. It's a tough sell. It's a tough sell. You want to play a Mario Tennis game in 3D? Like, yeah, you can. It works. It works the way you think it should. The other thing I'd say is that, like, you can play a lot of Virtual Boy games in 2D on a computer or a lot of devices. That stuff has been duplicated and emulated in a handful of different ways, including, and I have not tried this, but I believe you can play Virtual Boy games in a VR headset and get the 3D effect that you would even be missing otherwise. You can also do it on a 3DS, apparently, which is crazy. I have not done that either, but that sounds intriguing. But I love that they're going to sell a weird piece of plastic for this. I love that they're going to sell a plastic shell for the Switch that lets you... It reminds me of the year that it was like around the time of the Oculus Rift launching. And so it was kind of coming out for the first time. It wasn't quite on shelves yet. They weren't selling it yet. But they were showing games at E3. And I remember we were coming out of our appointment to see their stuff as Nintendo was going in. And so it's like Miyamoto and a couple of other guys going into a meeting room to go play VR. And we're watching this unfold and just like I wonder what those guys are going to think of that. I wonder if they'll make a VR thing. Probably not, right? Doesn't seem like their sort of thing anyway. And then you can't help but think about the Virtual Boy in the middle of all of this. And it took some time, but here we are. The Virtual Boy is back, motherfucker. They should make some new games. That'd be... If they wanted to be as silly as possible, making new Virtual Boy games would be the silliest thing they could possibly do. But it's good, this feels like the spirit of the Labo cardboard nonsense that they made last generation. Like this feels like a big, crazy, dumb thing for them to do, and good on them. Good on them! Good on them. The hassle is going to be that I bet that those plastic shells sell out immediately, the same way all the like new USB versions of the retro controllers do. When they go like, oh, we're going to sell a SNES controller because we're putting Super Nintendo games on the Switch, and now you can buy and like when they do that, that stuff is out of stock like immediately. I have to imagine the Virtual Boy will be just gone. Like the minute it goes on sale. But hopefully they'll restock it. Hopefully they'll restock it. I don't know. Right? I guess they should do that. Dude, I don't know. I don't know anymore. I don't know what to make of it. Let's take one more break. We'll come back and we'll get into the rest of the news after this. Hey, what's the story with your hair? Are you happy with it? Is it thinning out a little bit? What's going on? Are you reaching for hats a little more often? Stop it. Turn to Hims. Hims offers 100% online access to prescription treatments for regrowing hair in as little as 3 to 6 months, so you can see a fuller head of hair by the time fall is over. That's right. Hims offers convenient access to a range of prescription hair loss treatments with ingredients that work, including chews, oral medications, serums, and sprays. Doctor-trusted, clinically proven ingredients like finasteride and minoxidil can stop hair loss and regrow hair in as little as 3 to 6 months. And you shouldn't have to go out of your way, to handle this, to feel like yourself. Hims brings expert care straight to you with 100% online access to personalized treatments that put your goals first. There's no hidden fees and no surprise costs. Just real personalized care on your schedule. Hims is like a digital front door that'll get you back to where you want to be with simple 100% online access to those trusted treatments for real health concerns, all in one place. For simple online access to personalized and affordable care for hair loss, ED, weight loss, and more, visit hims.com/Jeff. That's hims.com/Jeff for your free online visit. hims.com/Jeff. Individual results may vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil and finasteride. Prescription required. See website for full details, restrictions, and important safety information. Today is the day for Skate. It went live, I guess, as we not long after we started recording this here podcast today. They've fixed a few things. There's patch notes to go with this rollout. They've been allowing people to play it for a very long time. Years. Like, there are people that have tested things in Skate that are not currently in the shipping game. They're launching it in some kind of, they're calling it early access. It says early access in big letters on the screen when you're launching it and all of that sort of stuff. And so it's a weird launch. Of course, it's a free-to-play game, and they are selling stuff. They've got founders packs that are like $44.99 or something, like, you know, they're selling stuff. If you want to buy premium currency so you can buy a pair of Dickies, they will happily let you do that. We've talked about Skate in depth already, so I'm not going to go over it too much, but they did roll out patch notes last night for both what they are fixing today, because they have not patched the game in a few weeks, so people have been playing a build of the game, and it's been messy. It's been very messy in a lot of ways these past few weeks. They're making some changes that will fix some of that, and they're acknowledging that there are some things that they are going to fix in a few weeks with their next patch, which is okay. So when I look at what they fixed and I look at what I saw in that game, this to me seems like you will probably still see some glitches. The thing that stuck out to me in their notes here is under the heading Progression Update. Our insider's preview showed you guys cranking through the game. So the team has looked deeply into progression rates and made some changes to how fast you earn XP. To note, we've eliminated any per drop XP, removed XP gain from items acquired through neighborhood rank up. We've streamlined all XP gains from drop items to be 50 XP regardless of rarity. And we have balanced XP gains in Market Mile mission item rewards. And so on the eve of it launching, they have decided to make the progression way slower. Now, this game, it basically has like 4 neighborhoods, and you don't get quests in, challenges don't appear in all 4 of those neighborhoods out of the gate. You're locked to, you can skate wherever, but they're just empty zones full of nothing. All of the challenges and goals and things are centered on one part of the world. And so eventually the second part of the city opens up, and then the third, you kind of make your way through it that way. My feeling on the game in these last few weeks has been that there has not been enough to do, and that a lot of the goals that you would do were very repetitive, because it had these timed challenges. Challenges will be like, get this score in, you have 5 minutes to check off everything on this list. Like, grind 30 feet, do 5 flip tricks, do a couple of grabs, do a body flip, whatever it is. Like, they put together a few things. There's a few different types of challenges, but they give you ample time to complete most of that stuff. There are challenges in the game that are permanent, and they will be checked off when you complete them, and you can't really do them again. And then there are time-limited challenges that kind of disappear out of the city and come back, like on a schedule. And you'll see on the map screen, it'll say challenges refresh in 11 hours, whatever. It's daily, 12 hours. I don't know what the actual rate of shuffling is. The problem is that you'll complete a quest, you'll complete a challenge in the game, you'll get credit for it and be like, okay, cool. And then you'll load the game up 3 days later, and that same challenge will be back in the world, and it will be listed as uncompleted because it's a timed challenge that has gone away and since come back. And so there are challenges in that game that I've done like 5 or 6 times over the last, few weeks of not playing it all that much, because they just keep coming back over and over again. And so it has this knock-on effect of making the game feel incredibly repetitive. So if they are also in conjunction with that being already, in my eyes, a pretty big problem with the game, if they're going to slow down the rate at which you earn XP so that it takes longer for you to open up challenges in the other areas of the game, oh shit, that sounds terrible, dude. Like, what? They fixed some crash bugs. There was weird notifications that were popping up that they corrected. There's some stuff that they, fixed performance issues related to quick dropping items. But one of the bugs I experienced, which is quick drops, which is like you unlock ramps. Like some of the things you unlock are like ramps and quarter pipes and rails and stuff. And so you can plop a very small number of those down in the world to create little, if you're having trouble with a challenge, you can put an extra ramp down and maybe it'll be easy for you or whatever. Just if you're skating around, you can plop some shit down and skate on it if you want. Sometimes those were broken. In fact, there was a challenge, like a tutorial-based challenge around using that system, and I was trying to place items in world, and they were not showing up. They were invisible. They weren't showing up at all, like whatever it was. And so I was stuck. I'd like quit the game and relaunch it a few times before it finally started working. That bug is not fixed in today's patch. That is something that is still on their known issues list, and it will be fixed in update 28 coming in a few weeks. The list of known issues is crazy. Known issue: players can be trapped by drop items in shop spawn locations. Workaround: change quick drop visibility in your social settings to only me. So if you turn off other players' items, then you won't get boxed in. You can grief players by dropping ramps around them that they can't get out from, Real cool. Crazy that wasn't something that they... I mean, again, like numbers of people have been playing this for a long time. It doesn't seem like that's a new issue that they just realized was happening. There's a lot of stuff like that. Whatever, man. Priorities, right? They're fixing crash bugs. Those are probably bigger deals than what we're talking about here. And they did fix some crash bugs. They also renamed some shoes. I don't know. These patch notes, like for a game that I was already like kind of bummed about, like, oh man, there's a core to this where it plays pretty well. And and plays mostly like the old skate games in ways that you're like, it's neat that this exists at all. The levels and the piles of stuff you have to put up with just to enjoy that experience of it being this free to play game and all this cosmetic stuff and all these challenges that you have to take forever to unlock, that for this to be the launch day update is really underwhelming, or I guess it's further disappointing. The game's problem also is like a lot of the characters are bad, and the voice work sounds like fake, and a lot of the dialogue is incredibly poorly written, and just like jokes that don't land and stuff that's just like whatever. There's a lot of stuff there that's just a mess. Colonel Sanders in the chat asks, is Hall of Meat in there? I'm assuming no. You're right, no. Hall of Meat is, as I understand it, it is a trademark that Thrasher holds. And so when they did that in those games, it was part of like them having a deal with Thrasher magazine to use it. If that's how I remember it. They do have stunt challenges that are basically the same thing, but worse. Where where you are jumping off of buildings and trying to land in dumpsters and hit trees and stuff. But like the impacts are not as crazy when you land. It's not like broken bones, NFL blitz, goal go 13 zoom in, like none of that is there. And so it just furthers this feeling of like, here's this lifeless, way too clean environment where everyone just loves skating, man. Yay! With like no storyline or to speak of, and like a lot of stuff like that, where it just feels like, it just feels like a game written by cops or something. Like it's really uncool, I guess. I don't know. Does it feature any skaters? No. I think there are pro skaters that maybe do voices in the game, but I don't think so. I have not unlocked all of the tours, to be fair here, so maybe there's something very late on, but I don't believe so. It's really, it's a bummer, and it's out now. Last little bit here, I guess take this with some fucking weird, this is probably nothing, but someone in the chat said it earlier, so I kind of looked into it. There are rumblings that Valve is about to announce something. There's rumblings that perhaps that they are about to announce whatever their next VR thing is. Perhaps later this week. There are, I guess, people who are known on YouTube for streaming VR stuff. And it seems like some number of them are in Seattle at the moment for whatever reason. Are they going to Valve to see something? Are they? Who knows? But that has been the that has been the suggestion that perhaps that people are up at Valve seeing whatever Deckard is going to turn into, if they're going to call that the Steam Frame. I feel like Steam Frame was a name that people were thinking, oh, maybe that's going to be like the kind of refreshed Steam machine or something that has also been going around. But Deckard, the supposedly a standalone VR headset, has been something that has been talked about and maybe surfaced in some of the Steam updates and things a little bit here and there to lend some credence to some of that speculation. And so if you've got people here claiming that they're going to be posting videos on a Wednesday and some of this other, I don't know, there's random word going around. So entirely possible that we see something along those lines tomorrow or sometime in the near future. I don't really know. But I got to figure that if they're making a standalone VR headset, it's basically a Steam Deck with lenses, right? Like it's, if it's a fully standalone device, then it is something that is going to probably be leveraging very similar technology to what is in the Steam Deck. And that's what they would do. That's what makes sense to me anyway. I don't know, but we'll see. We'll see what ends up what ends up coming out of that. Yeah, maybe it'll be a piece of cardboard that you can wrap around a Steam Deck and then strap it to your face. That would be pretty sweet. But they're what would they even put in that? Because I think we're talking about like the Steam Deck hardware. Like, would they put something more powerful than that in there? You on one hand you'd hope so, but also if they were going to make a more powerful device like that, then wouldn't you also want them to release an updated Steam Deck, which they have kind of said that they're not really looking to do in the exact near term because they're waiting for a more generational leap in technology to happen before they put that out. Maybe it ends up being the basic power of like a Steam Deck 1.5 or some of these Z2s or what some of these other chips that are finding their ways into other handhelds. Maybe they go with something that is a little beefier than what's in the Steam Deck. But I don't know. Yeah, we'll kind of see. We'll see how all that goes. And if there's any truth to that, I suppose. And that's about it for the news. Why don't we get into some emails here? Podcast@guard.bike is the email address. That is where you should be sending emails if you want to send them to me, where I will see them and take a look at them. We have a handful that came in this morning that I have not looked at yet. Alex from Lowell writes in and says, you mentioned in a past episode that games just released, and I'm curious, what was the first game you remember releasing on a specific date? Did it feel like the industry was maturing when others caught on to the same practice? I was too young in the 90s to really pay attention, but I remember Metal Gear Solid being one of those big releases in my youth. It's probably Mortal Monday or Sonic Tuesday. It is probably the release of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, but is actually, Mortal Monday was before that, right? So, that is probably the first one I remember. And I remember thinking like, oh, geez, it's crazy that they have a specific date and all this stuff. Like it because games didn't really have that. You would see games being reviewed in a magazine, like you would get EGM and they'd have reviews of games and you go like, oh, I guess these games are coming out soon. But like you didn't know when your store was getting it. You didn't know, did other stores have it already? The internet was not robust enough for you to have the answer to that question either. And so, yeah, their release dates are very hard to track around that time, like prior to that time, but certainly after that time as well, because most games still didn't have like locked down, this is when this is out type things. And there wasn't enough media and magazines and things, like there weren't enough things devoted to that for you to really know. Like music felt like it would just show up sometimes too. When Guns N' Roses put out Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 and did like a midnight opening for it, like it was like that album had a release date and time and everything. But if other albums and stuff had specific release dates, you didn't know them most of the time. Some independent record stores would have a wall and they'd write down, oh, here's when this album's out, or here's when, like you could look and see when something was out, but like it wasn't always obvious. Like I remember riding my bike to the music store and being like, oh my God, NWA has a new EP out. Holy shit. And Ice Cube has a solo album out. What the fuck is going on? And buying both of them at the same time. And being very shocked to hear, well, apparently NWA broke up. Holy shit. And yeah, so like, music didn't really seem like you knew when that stuff was coming out then either. And games certainly were not, were like less, mature and figured out than music was at that time. So yeah, game releases were just like, when does the truck get here? I don't know. Some distribution center has a bunch of copies of Shove It the Warehouse game on their truck, and they're driving across the country, ruining lives one store at a time. When will the truck come to your town? Who knows? And, that's just how a lot of that stuff was. I don't remember seeing specific release dates for games until much later in the 90s. The PlayStation, like by that time, I think, a couple of things happened, right? I mean, there was, like that stuff started to happen more and more, and the distribution started to be a little more buttoned up, and games started coming out at a more predictable rate. But also by the time we got to 96, 95, and, certainly by 97, you had websites covering video games, and part of the data that they wanted on their pages was like, when is this game out? And so you would go and you would ask Blizzard, when is Warcraft 2 coming out? When is this, like you would start to ask more of those questions of different publishers, and you would get that information to put in your database. And so, that information started to spread kind of as the internet started to spread. And you would find pages like I always found like there would be ads in the back of magazines, Video Games, Computer Entertainment, GamePro, EGM, the Trinity, if you will. And sometimes you would see these ads in the back that would have dates, if not dates, at least like months, because they would be selling, it'd be like some game retailer or distributor on, whatever, mail order. You'd call them up and buy a game, I guess. And they would have release date information there in their ad. And so that's the first like chunk of release date information I remember having. The rest of it would be like, oh, here's the Montgomery Ward Christmas catalog or whatever. Here's the Sears toy catalog, and here's what it had in it. And you're like, oh my God, these G.I. Joe vehicles are different colors than the ones that they normally sold. What the fuck? It's a fucking Sears exclusive, a JCPenney exclusive, whoever it was. And then games would be kind of treated the same way of just like, yeah, we've got them in this catalog because we know they're coming out at this time. And so a lot of that information was weird. But as we got through into the mid 90s, that stuff would start to be buttoned up. Both because I think distribution became a little bit more serious and better, but also because there were places on the internet reporting on it on a national basis. And so suddenly you had a way for people to see this like national information in a way that like, the newspaper doesn't say like, hey man, unless it was an ad for a game store in the newspaper, like they weren't reporting on video game release dates. And, so it, like that stuff was harder to come by. And a lot of people just didn't even really want it all that much or need it all that much. And so, yeah, I think that's how a lot of that stuff generally went. The stream seems to have dropped. I don't know why. The local recording is still here, but now it's reconnecting. And now that it's reconnected, we are here yet again. I don't know what happened there, but we got a brief blip in the connection. But anyway, that's how release dates went, is they were weird until they weren't. And I think that, probably GameSpot and IGN, N64.com, whatever IGN was, Snowball, whatever IGN was at that time. I think those sites and other sites like it having pages with release dates on them and the rise of online sales and some of that, all of that kind of worked to further kind of codify the concept of a reliable release date. But it would take some time for it to get there. Let's see here. Eric from St. Louis writes in and says, on the bonus show, which is a Patreon exclusive for that download, you were kind of lamenting what you would even do with a Mario Maker 3, and I got your answer. Leveraging the mouse support, you essentially take a new Mario Paint into it, and then people can put their custom artwork and music into their levels. Of course, they would need technology to watch for penises, but they seemingly conquered that evil, or good, with player artwork in the Splatoon lobbies. All of that, plus the obvious new theme, is for Wonder, and I think you're cooking. If you really wanted to do a Super Mario Wonder like motif in Super Mario Maker, you would need to be able to add Wonder effects to it. And how are you doing that? Are you adding like a limited number of Wonder effects that you can trigger, or you're not gonna be able to just like build your own from scratch? I don't know, man. I don't, that seems overly complicated, because then you're asking players like, oh, now you're gonna have this Wonder effect that lets you run on the wall, so you need to account for your level that way. And then if you turn off the Wonder graphical motif, do they then make Wonder effects that work in the Mario 1 graphical tile set or whatever? I think that gets to be a little complicated. I think that gets to be a little overly complicated in some ways. Doing allowing you to put your own artwork on the back wall of a stream, I think that could be fun. That there's potential there. Well, like, I don't know. Like, the thing I wanted was Super Mario 2, like the, Super Mario USA, if you will. Pick up some vegetables and throw them. I thought that would have been like a fun addition, like, but that's so different than the other Mario games that, you have to build kind of a different thing. One of the cool things about Mario Maker is that you could build a level and then go, actually, I want to change it to Mario World. I want to change it to Mario 3. I want to change it to, and Mario 2 riding on enemies instead of bopping them, like the gameplay becomes very different in a way that I think makes that a little trickier. Dalton from Pittsburgh writes in, we're seeing some very strange bitrate fluctuation on the live stream right now, where it is suddenly using 4 times the bandwidth that it is supposed to be using, which I have the bandwidth for, but Twitch does not. And so I don't know. We're dropping a small handful of frames here. I'm not really sure what's going on here. I don't see any other. There should not be any other. Well, 2 things. One, there should not be any other dramatic network activity happening here on the network. But also, I have enough bandwidth to handle that one way or the other. So, I don't know. That's a weird one. But hey, the local recording should. Yes, it's shader stutter. We've got to. If you people at home would just set your settings right. If you're trying to watch this 4K stream on your 4-year-old phone or computer, what the fuck do you expect? Smarten up, people! Dalton writes in and says, as you've got some kids now, have any of them shown any interest in Sanrio characters yet? Also, who was your favorite Sanrio character? I was always a Batsmaru kind of guy, I guess. This is a big cinema roll house, to be honest with you. My son's birthday, my son just turned 4. He is now 4, which is crazy to think. He is such a big boy. Oh, he's such a big boy. And he doesn't listen to anybody. All of these kids, it turns out, are bad at listening. But he's gotten quite good at We Love Katamari, at least. Anyway, he had a party. We got a face painter. We had a face painter come in and paint faces. For his party, and the baby, she got a Hello Kitty. She got a Hello Kitty face painted on her that was pretty cool. So yeah, I don't know. I would say limited interest in Hello Kitty around here from all 3 of them. But I don't know if they know enough about the full depth of the bench, the full roster, the full Sanrio. I don't know if they're like, well, Karopi's are dope and these other guys are fucking more. They're not there yet. Maybe they will be someday. But I got my son Fan Gamer. They make a bunch of t-shirts and stuff. Licensed. I guess that's the important thing. There's a lot of if you want to find video game t-shirts, there are a lot of ways to go. But they do a bunch of licensed stuff, and they have a Katamari Damacy plush, a plush Katamari and the Prince, and they got magnets in one of the Prince's hands and feet, so it'll kind of stick to the ball a little better. I got him that, and that was a hit. He was big time into it. And he's got that in his bed now, and that went over pretty well. He also got this cool. It's a Hot Wheels thing. It's a Hot Wheels dinosaur that is also a car carrier truck, and it's a dinosaur, and the dinosaur eats cars. And so if you it kind of transforms a little bit, where you flatten the whole thing out for when it's a truck, and then the dinosaur's mouth will just spin and it will chew up cars, and it has a spot inside of it where the cars are stored, and then you can open up a flap in the back and it poops all the cars out the back, and that's been very exciting. That pooping out the cars has been very exciting as well. And then you can raise it up into full standing dinosaur mode, and then there's a little 2-car track on its back where like they race down, and there's a little notch where the first car hits the notch, and that makes a trap door fall on the other side. So the first car rides off the back to safety, and the other one falls through a trap door and dies. And it's fucking cool. And also it has batteries, so the whole time you're pushing it, it's making growling noises, and also it farts. I'm convinced that it's meant to be a fart noise. You can't really tell out of the gate, but like it'll just sometimes just go like it's it's burping or farting because it eats so many cars. It's fucking neat, man. The only problem is if you're trying to eat cars that are like laying down on the on the ground or whatever, the car will roll as you're trying to eat it with the dinosaur, and it's sort of tricky. You kind of need to keep one hand on the car while it's eating the car. It's neat. It's fucking neat. I didn't have cool. I mean, I had some pretty cool shit, but I didn't have cool shit like that. Steve from Royal Oak, Michigan, writes in and says, just the other day I realized that Acclaim, the video game publisher, is spelled with 2 C's. Am I crazy for thinking that the logo says Acclaim with 2 K's? That's what I thought it was for decades. A lot of people think that. There are a lot of people that try to spell Acclaim with K's instead of C's, and I don't understand. Like, maybe I've just been doing this for too long, but like I don't think that I ever thought that Acclaim was spelled with 2 K's. There are still some people that try to. I mean, the logo. I don't think the logo looks especially like K's. Like a little bit, yes, like a little bit, but not that much. But yes, you are certainly not alone in that. Braden from Ontario writes in with an important question that I think, like I can't fault Braden for not knowing this, but like, listening to the song Bad Bad Man by John Cena featuring Bumpy Knuckles, I just wanted to know whatever happened to Bumpy Knuckles, and why didn't John Cena use Bad Bad Man as his theme for his heel run? So Bumpy Knuckles is also known as Freddie Fox, and he's been around for years, and he put out something not super recently, but I want to say it was like probably 2018, 2019 or something. He had something out. He did a feature on a De La Soul track. Like that dude's been around. Like Freddie Fox, like Bumpy Knuckles is legit, man. It was like that was when I heard that John Cena had Bumpy Knuckles on his record. I was like, oh fucking all right. Now we're fucking talking. Now we're getting somewhere. It was very exciting. But yeah, he's probably still around doing something. He's maybe getting up there in years. I don't know, but he had something. I'm going to say over the last 5 to 7 years, like he was certainly known for a lot more than just being on that John Cena record. As for why didn't John Cena use Bad Bad Man as his theme for his heel run, I don't know. I don't watch WWE anymore. It's been glorious, really. But it's because that song is too good and people would cheer it. I mean, if you're trying to be a bad guy in the kind of classic wrestle-brained carny sense, you can't do anything that people can latch on to. Like, that's why when you are working as a bad guy, you don't do big, flashy, flippy moves in the traditional, again, the aging and in some ways ancient ways that wrestling had been done for decades and decades. You would, if you wanted to be perceived as a bad guy, you would not put a cool song like Bad Bad Man on as you were walking out. I think they just had him walk out to silence, didn't they? Like it would have been interesting to have, because there was supposedly some song years ago that he recorded for when they thought they were going to make him a bad guy, and that maybe he would switch to that this time and people would finally get to hear it or, whatever. But like, they ended up as I understand it, going in that kind of old school direction of like, no, we're not going to have anything for you to latch onto. And guess what? It sucked. Like, I don't know, like it's, like seeing clips of it, and as someone who's not watching the weekly television or really keeping up on it, you still kind of encounter some of this stuff. And just everything I saw of it was just like, this is fucking terrible. Was this Travis Scott here? What the fuck? And then they just walked it all back, right? They just went like, oh, well, that sucked. He's a good guy again, or whatever they did. Like, it's just crazy. I don't know. Like, they seem like they have no fucking idea what they're doing over there anymore. They had like a brief period where it was like, this feels fresh and new. And then it seems like it just fucking fell apart on them. I don't know. Let's see. Paul from Cutoff Right Center says, I recently picked up an arcade stick to play retro shooters. I enjoy using it so much, I've been using it as my main controller for Retro Arch. It's making me appreciate the NES and PC Engine libraries. 2 buttons, that's all the developers had to work with. These consoles have amazing games, some of them quite complex, and they made it work with 2 buttons. SNES and GBA games are a pain in the ass with the arcade stick because of the shoulder buttons. To summarize, the NES was and is the perfect console. The accessibility really blew the doors wide open and enabled anyone to play. So I would argue, while I tend to agree with you, I would also argue that the lack of buttons on an NES controller led to a lot of situations where you needed to bring the start and select buttons into it, or have situations where you're holding down a button and pressing down, or like multi-function inputs in some genres of game, right? Or you would have to have overly cumbersome menus to account for the lack of buttons and so on. But you're not wrong. I mean, there is something to the idea of like, hey, like there's not a lot of buttons on this thing, and the games are, like, yeah, man, arcade games generally of the era didn't have a ton of buttons on them either. You'd have 3. Well, Double Dragon had a punch, a kick, and a jump. I think 3 in a lot of ways is ideal. I mean, as much as the 6-button Genesis controller felt great in the hand, I think that having 3 buttons on the Genesis was kind of awesome too. But it didn't have a select button, so in some ways it kind of just evens out, where you've got 3 buttons, 3 action buttons and a start button, or 2 action buttons, a start and a select. You're kind of just chopping things up a slightly different way, I guess, if we think about it. Nigel writes in, the PSP was so much better than the DS, in my opinion. It dominated handheld gaming for that generation. Pokemon games were tired, might have just been my age growing out of them, and the PSP became my music and video player, along with being my messenger machine for chatting with friends because I was a teen and couldn't afford a mobile phone. It was also a console I have so many amazing memories of, with 5 dozen different exclusives. It was basically a portable PS2, and we're now in an era where people crave to carry their PC with them, so why couldn't Sony follow it up? On paper, the Vita was perfect. It brought in a touchscreen, added 3G for mobile online, and included a second stick for the newly adopted standard of dual stick controls, which bizarrely only became cemented after Call of Duty 4. That's debatable. Long into the PS2's life, developers were still trying to do the GoldenEye thing. It couldn't just be a case of mobile, as the inferior 3DS ended up being a hit after its first few years of failure. Was it simply underpowered hardware? The PSP had hardware a decade ahead of its time, whereas the Vita used the same SoC as the iPad 2 and aged fast. So it couldn't do ports like the PSP could. Was it the name? Should it have been called the PSP 2 and been backwards compatible? Was it Sony giving up when Nintendo didn't? And should Sony make a PSP 3 now? So I think that the PSP's problem is really dependent on what other platforms you owned at the time and where you wanted to play your games. I think of the PSP as like, you got ports of PlayStation 2 games, but they were often reduced, and they were trying to be full-fledged console games as opposed to focusing on the strengths of being a handheld. I think that's the thing that Nintendo figured out over the course of the DS, and a lot of developers eventually kind of followed suit and realized like, oh, you know, these need to be platforms for like short sessions. You know, people are opening it up on a bus and playing it for 10 minutes and closing it and going and doing something else. It's not, you know, it's not something that people are going to sit down and play an 8-hour game on, a 15-hour game on it, or whatever. And I think the problem with the PSP library is that you eventually had a lot of developers that were just like, fuck it. We're just going to port our existing, like, here's Thug 2 remix, or, you know, like here's an adjusted port of a PS2 game. And you were either happy with that because you weren't playing it on PS2 already, or you already played it on PS2 and you're like, this is useless to me, you know? And so it came down to, you know, different developers taking advantage of the hardware in different ways. The PSP was really cool. I don't know. It felt great in the hand. The screen was great at the time. It really just stood out. It was a very striking device. The UMDs were neat. I liked the PSP quite a lot, you know. But I think ultimately Sony didn't really put its best feet forward on any portable, you know. Like, there are some really good first-party PSP games, and I think that stuff sort of swept out to sea a little bit over time. The Vita started there. With the Vita, it felt like Sony never brought its full development resources and full level of support over to that hardware out of the gate. And so with the first party not being what it needed to be, third party just never really gave a shit. And, you know, and at the time people were like, oh, we should be making games for phones, you know? And so the Vita felt very out of step with where gaming was potentially going and where audiences were going. I guess more correctly to say that audiences were going in that direction. And so I think that the Vita, like the portable console, I think the portable only device needed more. And so the 3DS or the DS, same deal. You know, here's this thing. It's got 2 screens. You're not going to have that on a TV. It's got a touch screen. You're not going to really have that on a TV. And the 3DS has 3D, which is like a fun gimmick that I think, you know, if you're like me, you turned it off after you played a lot of Ridge Racer, you're like, all right, that's good. I'm good. And it kind of went on from there. The Vita has no, and people will debate this all day long, but I don't think there's like a single Vita game that you go, here it is, the game that here's the first party, here's the thing that like launched with the Vita. Here's this big deal game. It's like, here's what's out on the Vita. Whereas on the PSP, you know, the PSP was carried a lot in Japan by stuff like Monster Hunter because that was so popular on the PSP. And so you'd have all these stories about like how the PSP was so big in Japan because people were playing Monster Hunter on the train and all this other stuff. And so worldwide, it had a bigger impact than maybe it did in the US. And so the Vita just feels like a game that launched, or like a device that launched at the end of an era, and people had already moved on, and Sony kind of limped in to begin with, and never really put its best minds onto the Vita software problem. Unless you count Gio Corsi. I mean, you know, like which he, you know, like there for a while there, you know, Vita games were happening. Largely because of him doing the work to get third parties to care about the Vita. I think that, you know, like the Sony never really had its heart in it at that point. And I do think that the PSP was a different time. And I just feel like the things moved on, and Sony never really felt like they were behind the Vita to begin with, and that's the Vita's biggest problem, right? But you're right that now people do want a device that can play full-fledged games, right? Like we talk about Steam Decks and Switch 2, and you know, like you look at the games that are on Switch, like a wide variety of games came on Switch, but a lot of it is, indie games that were popular on the PC and, Nintendo's big first party stuff and third party games here and there. And now you got like Cyberpunk on the Switch 2 and Street Fighter 6 and all this other stuff that, these are full-fledged console games. Like Borderlands 4 is going to ship. Will Borderlands 4 be less of a boondoggle than when Borderlands was on the Vita? There. Will that be? We'll see. I guess the thing to think about as everyone, because now we're on the Switch 2 and it's pretty similar to the Switch 1. And now you've got an Xbox branded device that is similar in nature, like in its own way, coming along later this year. Handheld PCs becoming more and more of a thing. In theory, we'll see. They'll be very expensive. We'll see if they catch on. But like there is a push. There is some sort of industry push in that direction to, make these handhelds happen. All of the new PlayStation rumors, and they've, I think they've even alluded to it, if I'm not mistaken. But like there will be a new Sony handheld. But instead of it being a dedicated handheld with its own lineup and its own software, they're going to make something that runs existing PlayStation software in some capacity. That it'll come out alongside or in the same time frame as the PlayStation 6, and that they will have some sort of device that will run PlayStation 6 games, but be a handheld. And it won't be as powerful as a PS5, but it'll somehow do that anyway. Whatever shape that ends up taking, it really does seem like that Sony is moving into this space as well. What do you think Nintendo does from here? Because someone in chat, when we were talking about the Virtual Boy, the plastic shell for the Virtual Boy, someone was like, do you think a Switch 3 will fit into it? I put it to you, dear listener, that I don't think they'll do this a third time. Switch 2 coming out just now. What do we got? If they do well with it, we're looking at another 7-8 years before they got to roll out something next. Another 7 or 8 years of your competitors, getting into the space that you've been in and dominating in. I think that's a prime time for Nintendo to say, oh, we're doing something completely different. And they'll do their OLED screen and they'll do their Switch 2 Lite. Yeah, sure. They'll iterate on this hardware, but I mean, like, generationally speaking, when Nintendo moves over to a whole new device, what do you think that device is? Is it a high-powered, high-end console? Is it the screaming fastest GPU in the world? They just go hard the other way and say, plug this box into your fucking television and play fucking Mario on it, you asshole. Like, is it the most powerful, crazy? Who knows? I'm going to say probably not that, but there's a lot of years for a lot of technology to spring into existence and potentially be usable in the mainstream. Who knows, right? I don't know. Yes, a 3-screen handheld, Pat. You've got it. What would you even do with a third screen? I mean, you could do, for local 2-player games, one person holds the left side of it, the other, I don't know. Yeah, you could. There's a lot of different stuff you could do, I guess. But yes, Discord, a third screen, a dedicated chat screen. It's a very Nintendo-like solution, but it's emoji only because it's just Nintendo's solution. Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't have the answer to that question, but it's interesting to think about for, I mean, a handful of reasons, really, like, what do you do when the competitive space is a lot different? Because when the Switch came out, no one was making anything like this. This idea of a hybrid console handheld thing was not a thing. And then, Valve came into the space, and it's hard. It feels weird to even call it the space, because it really just feels like that they are doing separate things in a lot of ways. You know, it doesn't necessarily feel like that the Steam Deck is infringing on Nintendo's territory, but that's technically true. I think when you get Sony putting out a portable PlayStation that is also part of the same hardware family as its console or whatever, like that starts to become a different story, because that's something that they do worldwide, right? I know they've put the Steam Deck out in Japan, and you know, like they've made their inroads, and I think they've done really well making those inroads and kind of building the case for it. But right now, when you look at how the industry is right now, I think when PlayStation has a similar device on the market on shelves in Japan, I think that becomes a very different story for Nintendo, and as they think about their future and what it looks like and whatever else, right? So we'll see. But I think, like Sony has never been, and this is a great way to solve the problem of Sony's handheld hardware. I think the PSP suffered from this to a lesser extent than the Vita did, but it's a similar situation where your A-list developers are not making games for that thing. Now, developers became A-list PSP developers over the course of that. You're Ready Dawn, like whatever. Like there were definitely like a lot of big, cool PSP exclusive games where they're like, oh, okay, well this is not the God of War game that you're playing on PlayStation 2, but we made something over here that's actually in some sick way better and crazier. And they ported some of those back to PS2 in some cases. Nuts. When they hit upon some of those games working out as well as they did. But like Sony was not good at splitting its efforts. Nintendo was pretty good when they had a handheld and a console. They were pretty good at supporting both, but oftentimes it was like different franchises and different takes on franchises, and they were really good at making games that were appropriate for each device. They made console games for their console. They made handheld games for their handheld. In some ways, I feel like that's what we've lost in the Switch. When you take all of Nintendo's development resources and apply it to one platform, we sort of lost a lot of the handheld-minded first-party games. And we're starting to see, like Rhythm Heaven is coming out. Like you're starting to see snippets of that coming back to life nowadays. But like on the GBA, there were so many great first-party games that just, some of them never came out over here and whatever else. But like Nintendo made great games for that thing, and for the Game Boy before it, and Game Boy Color, and for the DS, of course. Like there was just, they had that mentality of making handheld games, and they were making them great. And now the Switch, you don't really see that smaller tier. I mean, they would come across as smaller tiers of games. I mean, in some ways they would, compete with some of the indie games that are available on the Switch, and tons of third parties are making games like that all the time on that platform. But yeah, man, I miss that. I miss that part of Nintendo in a lot of ways. And so that's why when they announced a new Rhythm Heaven, it was so exciting, because it was like, oh, okay, this is the cool shit, the cool weird shit that I want to see happening more often, But yeah, it's a very weird time, I think, on that front, right? When we think about the future of that form factor, and I think even just the future of the Switch right now, the Switch 2, like things feel weird. I don't know if you feel that way, but like there's something about the weird dev kit situation where some studios are having trouble getting dev kits, and other studios are very much not having trouble getting dev kits. We've had some people write in, and there's been stories going around coming out of Gamescom, and it doesn't seem like any of that stuff is fully accurate. It's a lot of people guessing at what a problem is and not necessarily knowing. But there's a situation, where some studios that you would, it was when the Warframe developers were out there saying they didn't have dev kits. You're like, that's crazy. Like with how big Warframe has been and all of that, like It just seems like something that should not be a problem. But here we are, right? And the longer that takes, the longer it takes for those games to come out. So it's sort of weird. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like some of that stuff just feels a little strange. And have the Warframe developers have since confirmed that they got dev kits? Good. See, all it takes is like, I mean, not every developer can get away with this, especially with a company like Nintendo. You rattle their cage too much, you're just as likely to get the opposite. But if you're in the right place at the right time with the right argument, you can get taken care of pretty quick, I bet, by saying like, hey, it sure looks like you guys don't know what you're doing over there and are not sending out dev kits. Have some dev kits. Fuck. But yeah, I don't know. Weird times. Let's see. John from Greece writes in. Has been listening since 2003. I have bought every single console that's been released since 1995, including an Ouya. I'm skipping whatever the next Xbox is. In my mind, Nintendo consoles are there to play Nintendo exclusives. PlayStation is if you want to play almost everything but don't want to get a PC, either because it might be more expensive or because you're afraid of settings. I don't know, man. Xbox has the strategy of releasing everything everywhere all at once. So what is an Xbox? A Game Pass delivery mechanism? According to Microsoft, everything's an Xbox anyways. I could just play some Game Pass somewhere else. When everything is an Xbox, nothing is an Xbox. That's deep. Personally, I was super excited for the Series X, and now it's collecting dust. It might be the first time I unplug and retire a current gen console. What gives? Yeah, I mean, sure. Yeah, I think that is something that is going to impact different players differently depending on how and where they play their games. There are people that are in certain use cases where, the strategy for Xbox makes a ton of sense, and Game Pass ends up enabling them to play way more games than they would otherwise, and all of that. But if you're out there and you're purchasing every console and you own every console, like I am not in an entirely dissimilar boat here. Whereas I am sitting in a room here with two PCs, a Steam Deck, an Xbox Series X, a PlayStation 5 Pro, a Switch 2, and two Switch 1s over there. And I guess that's about it. I don't have a lot of reasons to turn on an Xbox because those third-party games all exist on PC, and the first-party stuff does as well. And because Microsoft is shipping its stuff day and date on PC, the PC is more powerful than the Series X, so I would rather play games there. In situations where games are coming to other platforms exclusively, I have more reason to turn on a Switch 2, for better or worse, right? It would be great to play Donkey Kong on a PC and have no slowdown and have it run at a higher resolution. It would be great to, sure, that's just not the reality of where things are, right? And so you need to have a Switch 2 if you want to play those games. If you want to play Ghost of Yotei anytime soon, then you will need to own a PlayStation 5 of some of some form, right? Do I think that that's best for long-term business and best for whatever else? I don't know. What's the trade-off on we need a reason to get people to buy these consoles versus we just need to sell as much software as possible, right? The day and date strategy of Microsoft of putting all these games on PC, I think, and in some cases other platforms, but generally speaking PC, I think it makes a ton of sense when you take into account that the Xbox was already not doing great in the market. In a situation where the Switch 2 is selling just fine and the PlayStation 5, they're happy with where the sales of it are of that right now, they can be in that place of okay, buy a Switch 2 or hey, in 6 months we'll put this out on PC. So if you're willing to wait for Ghost of Yotei and you're not in our ecosystem and you're not willing to spend $800 with $7 whatever for a PlayStation 5 Pro or whatever the $550, whatever it is, $500, then you can wait and play it on PC. You know, Sony gets to kind of have it both ways right now because they're doing well enough on hardware that they can afford to do it. But if that bottom drops out and, you know, as prices of hardware keep going through the fucking roof, fewer people are going to be able to afford a PlayStation 5. And you have a situation where like people are going to like, well, if I'm going to spend that kind of money on a gaming device, I might as well just get a PC because it can play this, and I can do Game Pass and the PlayStation stuff. And really you just kind of lose out on the Nintendo games. But I'm with you, John from Greece, in that I don't find a lot of reasons to turn on my Xbox Series X. Now, I will grant you that not only do I own all these platforms, but I am also in a unique position where a lot of games just show up, right? And so, you know, that impacts what I play and where I play it on top of things being the way they are. So I'm not saying that I am a perfect, like, here's how it works for me. You know, like that's just, you know, the weird part about what I do for a living, right? But yeah, there are not a lot of great reasons to turn on an Xbox if you are in that situation. However, you know, Game Pass is still a heck of a deal. And so if you didn't own any of these things and you had to buy something, you know, like the price, the affordability of an Xbox compared to a high-end PC or whatever, you know, there's like that's something worth considering, I suppose. But where you net out on that, I think is highly individualized, and there's, you know, a lot of different wrinkles to those use cases that are going to lead to different answers for different people. I think the thing we're running into more, and this is something that, you know, I've seen some writing about this, that I guess I thought that we would be a little further along on this, but it's something that it feels like needs to happen before whatever first party Xbox hardware comes out or is announced or whatever. But it's this idea of Xbox Play Anywhere. And that is the feature that lets you buy a game once and play it on both an Xbox and a PC. And in theory, I guess, in the cloud as that continues to be built out and that feature set continues to grow. And that a lot of larger third-party games are, like, you know, you go to a large third-party, you go to John Madden and you say, hey, John, we think it would be cool if when people bought a copy of John Madden's football on the Xbox, that they were also able to play the PC version of the game. And they say that, and then John Madden looks at them. He puts down the tongs and lets the turducken roast for a while. And he says, get the fuck out of my face. Boom! Because EA would much rather sell you 2 copies of a game than give you one for free. Right? And so I think when we talk about these larger, you know, like, if you're Warner Brothers, are you going to go like, oh, sure, yeah. Oh yeah, we'll sell 2 versions of Mortal Kombat instead of, yeah, sure, we'll just give one of those away for free. They're like, that's preposterous. That's crazy. What? Are you high? Are you out of your mind? You know, and so like larger third parties, with some exception, are not getting into the Xbox Play Anywhere ecosystem. You're seeing more and more like smaller developers, indie developers, like that sort of stuff is occurring, but like, you know, EA would either rather, EA will happily sell you a subscription to its subscription service if you would like to play multiple versions of the John. And most of, I don't think, like, most of EA's games are not cross progression, cross play. Like you know, there's cross play more and more, but you know, like a lot of that stuff is not the way that an Xbox Play Anywhere game can work, with all of that stuff being seamless. And that stuff is really neat when it works. But I also think that the minute, you know, if they're going to start selling a PC, but they still want to have the ability to run old console games from the previous generations of Xbox, I don't know how you get away. I don't know how you pull that off. I don't know how you put that by a lot of these third parties and get them to sign on for it. So like, I feel like that's kind of a unanswered question around a lot of this stuff, is that Xbox Play Anywhere probably needs to be a much more robust and supported system by a much, much larger percentage of third-party developers, for them to be able to continue to make that transition into whatever the future of Xbox is. And maybe this eventually gets to a point where, since it's all a PC anyway, play anywhere is a weird misnomer, because all of these things are just running Windows anyway, and so it'll run across the board no matter what. You just have to put your PC version into the Xbox store, the Windows store, whatever it is, in order to appear on all these platforms. And I don't know, some bigger third-party games are still skipping that storefront entirely, right? It's not. The support situation is not automatic the way you think it might be when you really dig into it. Mikey from Australia writes in and says, have you played any 2XKO? I guess that is the right way to pronounce it. It is not double KO, which would have been a more fun name. Anyway, Mikey says, personally, I'm having a lot of fun with it, but it's way more systems heavy than I was expecting, and I haven't even touched some of the more bizarre stuff like duo play or the Juggernaut fuse that lets you ignore all the tag mechanics. It's rare for a studio as big as Riot to enter the fighting game market, so I'm interested in your thoughts on the game and how you think it will be received in the market. Yeah, they've I guess more and more people got invited to 2XKO. I got an email from Riot last week from, I must have signed up for that beta at some point years ago. I don't even know when. And it was like, download 2XKO now. This is your Riot name. And it had what looked like it might have been my Riot. I don't know. I was like, oh, I guess I did sign up for a Riot account at some point, because I guess I did play Valorant for about 45 minutes. I installed League of Legends once and never played an actual game because I'm good. And so, yeah, I don't know. I downloaded 2XKO and played a little bit of it. And I spent more time being mad at having like the Riot Vanguard icon in my tray. And if the service doesn't start when your system launches, then you have to reboot in order to play a Riot game. And like, it was just like, this sucks. The whole experience of the way their anti-cheat exists on systems is awful. Like, this is a miserable experience. And I was like, I kind of, like, I went through the training in 2XKO, and my first thought after seeing all that was like, I should uninstall this shit. I don't like having this here. I don't like having this installed. It feels gross. And so that is my main thought about 2XKO, is that I think their anti-cheat looks like shit. And it is like intrusive in a way that I was like, I don't think I want to have to consider this. There's plenty of anti-cheat out there and whatever else, but like, you're telling me I need to reboot because your anti-cheat needs to be running at boot. I think my response to that is get fucked. So I only played a couple of matches of it, and my feelings on 2XKO are that I don't like tag games. And I know they've got, after you pick your two characters, you kind of pick a thing, and that'll be like, oh, you can actually just turn off the tagging in favor of giving turning your second character into a more fully featured assist character. My least favorite things in fighting games, though, are tag games and assist characters. And so, like, they've built this game around mechanics that I'm already kind of not super into. And it's a bunch of characters that I don't know where any of them. They're all League of Legends characters, I think. I don't know who any of these people are. I don't especially care who any of these people are, and so I didn't have any. There was no one for me to immediately latch onto. It played okay. It's not great on a gamepad with analog triggers, I'll say, because it uses the analog triggers for your specials by default, and so it's like light, medium, heavy, and then like a tag button on the face, and then you're using the L2 and R2 and sometimes both of them together for your specials. And I thought that didn't feel great. And, having the big squishy triggers. You could remap it, obviously, or I mean, you could hook up a fight stick is probably the right answer there. But like, I didn't especially love the way it controlled in that sense, and as someone who is not super into tag games, I did not find there to be too much for me there. And it just feels like, I don't know, Rising Thunder, the game that, you know, before these people got bought and absorbed into Riot a zillion years ago, like, it feels like it's just got a lot of systems and stuff, and, you know, here's a push block that's also a tag if you tap the button again, and, you know, you kind of use your assist character to kind of get you out of a situation. Like, there's a lot of stuff like that in there that just feels like, I don't know, Rising Thunder felt like it was meant to be maybe a little more, I don't want to necessarily say beginner friendly, but it was something that was like, they had stripped it. They had produced a game that really got you down to the mind games a lot faster than what this feels like, because this is, you know, like, this has auto combos and you can kind of make your own, you know, there's something in there where you can turn, called pulse, and you can turn that on and off. Like, I wasn't super clear on what that system was. But yeah, I don't know. Like, it looked okay. It was flashy in some ways, but it was just like, I just don't, I'm not finding anything. I'm not feeling a pull from it at all. I'm looking at it and going like, okay, yeah, you made a tag game. It's like, I already kind of don't want to deal with this stuff. Like, even though you've made the inputs more simple or whatever, it still doesn't feel right. And just doesn't really seem like what I'm looking for out of a fighting game. So yeah, I don't know. I had forgotten that I installed that until reading this email just now. I was like, oh right, yeah, I guess I do have that, don't I? Did I play Marvel Tokon? I did not get into the Marvel Tokon beta or whatever, so I have not really spent any time with that. I saw people that I trust their thoughts on fighting games being extremely not into what Marvel was doing. And so yeah, I don't know. I'm curious to see how that one pans out, but that it sounds like they're making some very weird choices in Marvel that we'll see. But yeah, you know, like, not really into assist characters and not really into tag games. So 2XKO, not really doing it for me. Let's see here. Bill wrote in to ask, is Windows 10 end of service the biggest loss of game-capable hardware in history? And he says, like many other people, I imagine, I have a Windows 10 PC that I don't know what to do with after security updates stop in a little over a month from now. That's October 14th, by the way. This machine can play 90% of the games I own on Steam. I played through all of Elden Ring on it multiple times, but it is not Windows 11 compatible. I'm lucky enough to have a newer PC, but this is still really leaving a bad taste in my mouth. Intellectually, I know it's apples and oranges, but any talk of Xbox's devotion to backwards compatibility really rings hollow when they expect me to just dump a machine that can run virtually every game I own in a ditch. My questions are, with the Steam hardware survey showing that older PCs are the norm, what impact do you think Windows 10 end of service will have on gaming? Is this the biggest termination of service of game-capable hardware in history? And what would you suggest I do with this machine? It's an i5 4670 with a 1080 in it. Well, Bill, I guess the thing I would say is, like, there's nothing that's going to make that thing stop working. It's not like October 15th, you're going to turn on your machine and it's just going to, like, smoke's going to pour out of it like it was a fucking Mission Impossible briefing. It's not just going to, go up in smoke and be like, all right, Told you needed to upgrade, stupid. Like, you'll still be able to use it. Over time, we'll see, right? I mean, what sort of exploits will people come up with for Windows 10, like once it is going to stop getting critical security updates to keep it secure? I would think, and again, attack surface is being what it is, like who knows? But if you were to take that machine and only use it for gaming, and you're like, okay, this thing boots to Steam Big Picture. I don't pop a web browser on this thing. I don't there's no server software running on it that is exposing ports to the internet, the open internet. Like, there's a lot of stuff like that if you're not doing those sorts of things, you would be less likely to attract malware or whatever. But malware is tricky, and you never know. Like when you go look at, like, what is it, Samba version 1, when you go SMB1, how exploitable that is in a very scary way. But you put it behind a sound enough firewall, you put it behind it, you make sure all the ports are as wrapped up on it as you can get. There may also be a situation where, other antivirus and malware people, I'm sure that they will continue to sell subscriptions or what have you for Windows 10 machines as they can. We'll see what happens with driver updates, right? Like how much longer will NVIDIA support? I think they did say that they're not looking to support Windows 10 for much longer, right? That NVIDIA is looking to kind of move on. So you could move on that way. Or find yourself a nice Linux install that is gaming focused. I don't know. Like, I know a lot of the kind of SteamOS based flavors of Linux out there are expecting AMD hardware in a lot of cases, but is it Pop OS or Bazite? They're like, there's some out there that are definitely like better at handling NVIDIA GPUs than others from the last read-ups I did on it. But you could always dual boot Linux on it and see how that works out for you. And, maybe there'll be some games that won't run right for anti-cheat reasons or whatever, but maybe Bazite Bazite has an NVIDIA image. Okay, so there's an NVIDIA, there's a flavor, some variant of Bazite that will work with NVIDIA stuff. So maybe that ends up being a viable path to go down. And then you're just getting away from Windows entirely. Again, that'll prevent you from playing like a Destiny 2 or Call of Duty or Battlefield or, 2XKO. But you maybe weren't going to play those on a 1080 anyway. So if it was something you were already looking to play older games on in the first place, I bet a nice Bazite install or something like some gaming focused flavor of Linux would probably work really well for you. Obviously it's easy to say that without sitting down and actually doing it. And, like your mileage may vary depending on what games you want to play and maybe you've got some weird motherboard that just doesn't like, there's a billion things that could happen between here and there. But a lot of that stuff is relatively well sorted by now. Like, you certainly have an opportunity there to take this thing and throw Linux on it and just keep using it as a gaming machine. You said that you already have a newer machine, so you could keep Windows on that one for whatever your Windows needs are, and go that route. It's not super difficult. It's easy to test out too. Like, it's very easy to like get a bootable USB image or dual boot a PC or whatever to get Linux up and running on it, as long as you've got enough hard drive space to handle that. I would probably look into that. That sounds like a fun project, honestly. If I had a machine that, like, the machine I have behind me is perfectly, the one with the 4090 in it is perfectly capable of running Windows 11 and it's fine. But there's a part of me that kind of wants to throw Linux on it anyway, just to have something to fuck around with. Sometimes you just need something to fuck around with, You just need a fucking weird project that you can break and reformat over and over again and go, I don't know, man, shit. Like sometimes that's just fun. But yeah, you could set up a dual boot thing. And then if you eventually come to realize that you really like that dual booting scenario, then you could further invest in that regard. Let's see. Some more people wrote in discussing the Borderlands of music. A lot of people saying Offspring. I think we decided after a few people, both on Blue Sky and via email, wrote in suggesting that Green Day is the Borderlands of music. And I think there's something to that in terms of like, yes, early Green Day is quite good. And then at some point they kind of became a sick parody of themselves and wanted to be taken much more seriously than they maybe deserved to. And they had one really good yes, and then they did a Broadway play. That's actually that's a pretty decent choice. I don't know. Let's see here. Grant writes in and says Square Pusher or Aphex Twin. I don't know that I have enough data to make that call right now. Every so often I go, I should listen to some more Aphex Twin and sit down and listen to a bunch of it and go, okay. Like, I don't hate this the way that I did in the 90s maybe, but like, I don't, like, all right. Square Pusher, I'm probably slightly less familiar with than even Aphex Twin, but they've never really been in my wheelhouse per se, and so I've never really people in chat are debating this Green Day thing. I mean, I think when you take the Green Day catalog, my initial thought was that like Green Day is actually too good for this, but also I think Green Day covers the quality like really well. And if anything, early Green Day is much better than Borderlands 1. That's where maybe it breaks a little bit, because everything from basically like if you take Dookie and everything before it, Green Day is fucking amazing. And then everything after Dookie is not. Like American Idiot is like, it's cool that they pulled it off, and those aren't necessarily bad songs, but then what American Idiot did to Green Day when you look at everything that came out afterwards, you just go, okay. Some of this stuff is fine, but if you want to listen to, I recommend going and getting go and listen to the Network. Honestly, go and listen to go get yourself a copy of Money 2020. The first part 1, part 2, the follow up they did to it is not as good, but the Network. That Network album, which has spoilers, Green Day they are members of the Network. That Network album, Money 2020, is fucking awesome. It is so fucking good. Anyway, the takeaway here is I should at some point probably spend some time listening to more Square Pusher than I have. Like, I don't have a huge knowledge of the catalog, but what I've listened to is like, it's fine. Aphex Twin, I'm a little more, I would say even a little more ambivalent of just like, yeah, this is this is extremely well made, and I don't have a connection. I just don't really have a connection to it. For whatever reason, that just never, I was not into that style of music when that stuff was coming out, and in the years ahead, it was just like, you know, like I came around a little bit just with a more open, being more open to electronic music in general. But yeah. Vince from Philly writes in about the Superstation 1 and wondering if I'm going to get one. Says, after being FPGA / Mr. Curious for a while, I pre-ordered one of these. The PlayStation 1-esque shell sold me. I'm getting pretty excited, but I'm worried I'm going to be falling into the RetroTink upscaler rabbit hole within a year. So the Superstation is, you know, this guy, he made a dockable, like a mod for the Switch Lite that makes it dockable, which is insane. And he's making it's something called the Mr. Pi, which is like not a great name, but it is basically Mr. equivalent hardware. It is compatible with the Mr. But it's significantly cheaper than cobbling together all the parts yourself, which is super appealing. Because I found a receipt for a Mr. that I bought a while, like 6 years, like maybe not, was it 6 years? Maybe like 5 or 6 years ago that I bought my first Mr. And it was like $500 or something. It was a lot of money. But this, you know, he's selling these kind of Mr. equivalent devices for like 200, 135 or something. Like they're super cheap. Anyway, he's doing a thing called the Superstation, which is meant to look like a PlayStation. It will take real discs. It will have different video outs on it, but it is still effectively a Mr. in a lot of ways. And it's cool. So yes, I pre-ordered one. I don't know why. I just like, I have a Mr. I have two Misters here, in fact. But it looked cool, and he's going to sell a separate dock for it that looked really neat. And so I did end up getting one of those because it looks pretty slick. You're worried they're going to be falling into the RetroTink rabbit hole within a year. So the default output on the Mr. is really great. And the Superstation has a lot of really good outputs on it from the sounds of things already. It'll hook up to an old TV if you want to do that. But this stuff was designed to hook up HDMI out of the box. And so you don't need to get a RetroTink for a Mr. However, it's pretty fucking cool. Because with the Mr., you can basically have it do analog video out over HDMI. They call it direct video mode. And so you have the RetroTink do the scaling to scale it up to 4K. The Mr. by default, I think, can do up to 1440. But it's really kind of made for 1080. And if you're a scanline sicko, if you're really big on fake scan lines and black frame insertion and all of those other features, then yes, the RetroTink is going to satisfy those needs. I'm kind of into what the RetroTink can do on that front, and I am very much not a scanline sicko. The catch is, like, since I'm capturing things from the Mr. so frequently or running it through a capture card, I actually can't run most of those filters and scan lines and all of that stuff because it doesn't capture well. It looks super fucked up on the capture. So I have to kind of capture it raw no matter what. And that's been fine. But you don't need a RetroTink to enjoy a Mr. But I have been enjoying what the RetroTink does with a Mr. connected to it, because it can automatically send a signal through the HDMI that says, here's what core is running. And you can have profiles on the RetroTink that see that and go, oh, okay, cool. We know we need to crop this way, turn this on, do this. And it automatically configures itself based on what you're running on the Mr. at any given time. It's fucking cool. But the RetroTink 4K Pro, like, it is very expensive for what is ultimately super optional feature-wise. Like, don't do this unless you think you might also have more uses for a RetroTink than just a Mr. There's another piece of FPGA hardware, and I want to say it's the DE25. There's been a handful of different FPGAs that people have looked at and said, like, oh, this is going to be the future. Like, the next Mr. is going to run on this or this or this. I think it's the DE25 is the latest in a growing line of here's the thing that's going to replace the Mr. and we'll see if any of those ever catch hold. And if, because if eventually you're going to want to have more power for this stuff, but like, the Mister scene is still evolving and going. Like, the Mister is probably going to be the first place where you'll, and I'm putting pressure on the developer of this core right now. But like, there's progress. It's probably going to be the first place where you will be able to play CDI games that require the digital video adapter, the MPEG card, like Dragon's Lair and Thunder in Paradise, and a lot of important CDI software. He has a version of that core up and running that runs Dragon's Lair right now. And it doesn't run all of the MPEG stuff. It doesn't run the video, the movies and stuff that came out on CDI, but like, he's making progress on that stuff, and it's awesome. Then you've got like Hotego's working on CPS 3, so in theory Street Fighter 3 will at some point run on a Mister. And then there's that weird kind of offshoot group that said that they were going to have their own hardware solution that never materialized, and they had a bunch of people lined up that at a while there it seemed like a big deal when they announced it, and they were like, oh, Narc and Mortal Kombat aren't going to run on the Mister, it's going to require this other thing because we need more power, and like, none of that stuff ever materialized. I don't really know where that stuff stands, but that's kind of it's a weird, it's a scene. I'll put it to you that way. It's a scene with all the ups and downs of any scene. Psychus asks, have I checked out any of the laser active emulation stuff? Yeah, I talked about that on the show last week. That Ares is now, which is an emulator for PC and other platforms, I assume. Ares can now run Pioneer laser active games like Pyramid Patrol and Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. The Pioneer laser active, basically you took what looked like a car stereo, a detachable car stereo, and plugged it into the front of it, and you plugged in the Genesis one, and you could play Genesis games, and you could play Sega CD games, but also you could play Genesis-based Laserdisc games. And then there was another one for the PC Engine, for the TurboGrafx, that you would plug into the front of it, and it would play TurboGrafx games. And then they also made some Laserdisc games that are TurboGrafx compliant. So you need to have both if you want to play the full library of Laserdisc games. Anyway, the Genesis, the Mega Drive side of that, is now emulated and up and running inside of Ares. And so now you can play these Laserdisc games. There's a great story. Read Only Memo is an emulation newsletter that Wes Fenlon runs. That's great. There's not a lot of great. It's like that and like Retro RGB or Retro RGB are like the only places I feel like I can go for emulation related news, and some of that stuff. It's still not enough. There's room for more. But it's a 16-year journey that it took for laser active games to be emulated. And I played a bunch of Pyramid Patrol, and it was exactly how I remember it from when it was new. Not a great game, but so awesome that I could play it. The game is like 28 gigs because Laserdiscs are analog, and you can't really compress them down because different games use the Laserdisc in different ways that you can't really compress it without fucking it up. So the games are very large, but it's really cool. It's really cool that stuff is in a playable form. I should get my hands on some more Laserdisc games, and maybe we should stream some of those at some point to take a look at it. But like the amount of different technology that had to come together for that to happen, like, hey, the Domesday duplicator, a process of finally properly digitizing Laserdiscs to begin with, which that was already a hard problem. And then adapting that in various ways to be able to capture all the data on a laser active disc and all this, it's such a wild, process that it's great that we're finally at this point. Ken Can we play Time Traveler yet? Yes, you can. You can play Time Traveler in MAME. It's not projected onto a weird bendy holographic display, but yes, you can play Time Traveler on your PC right now. I don't know that I recommend it, but yeah, you can. You do you. Like so many things regarding emulation, once you jump through all the hoops to get there, you might find that the games themselves are not worth playing, but you sure can play them, and that's what matters most. Michael in Kansas City, Missouri. Rice says, based on your recommendations, I've played a ton of Vampire Survivors and recently got into Soulstone Survivors. Playing both of these games has me thinking it's time for a Survivors-style reboot of Smash TV. Do you know who owns the IP, and what would you like to see out of a reimagined Smash TV? It's Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers, unless they have sold it off separately, which I don't think they did, but Warner owns all of that Midway IP. We were talking about that last week with Paperboy when we were playing Paperboy 2 on the NES. Oof. And what would I want to see out of a reimagined Smash TV? So the cool thing about Smash TV is that it's fucking hard. And the cool thing about Smash TV is that it's a dual joystick shooter and that it's tough and it's and it's arcade hard or whatever. I got pretty good at Smash TV at one point. I'm not nearly as good as I was then, but I'm still okay at it. That and Total Carnage. I am really hung up when it comes to a reimagined Smash TV. I was at DICE, the video game trade show. This might have been 2008. I forget when it was, but Mark Turmel was there, one of the creators of Smash TV, along with NBA Jam and Turmoil and all those great hits. And he told me about his plans for a Smash TV sequel for arcades that never happened. And that basically the idea was that it was a tall cocktail it was like a 4-player cabinet where one player is standing at each side of the square, and that it was an idea for a 4-player Smash TV game in that cabinet style. And I've been unable to let go of that vision ever since, because that would have been so fucking awesome to see. And so, yeah, I don't know. I'm unable to imagine a reimagined Smash TV because I want a proper, just direct sequel to Smash TV. But yeah, that's, I would not, I think also I would say that I think a lot of the wave has maybe crested on the Vampire Survivors knockoff thing. I think those games are cool, and it's not to say that there will never be another new game in that style that will be good, but like a lot of them came out. I downloaded like 4 more of them last month and played them, and I was like, okay, these are, yeah, okay. I still don't think these are as good as Vampire Survivors or a handful of the other knockoffs that came in the months following. And so I just like, I feel like that trend is done. And it's not to say that someone won't break through with another one at some point, and there are still really good ones. Yeah, the Deep Rock Galactic one is really good, and they're still adding on to that thing. That's a really good game. Oh, that's okay. They're hitting 1.0 tomorrow. That's good to know. Maybe I'll check back in on that. That one was really good. But yeah, man, there have already been a handful of games in that style that have been really cool and really well done. And so I don't know that anything I don't know that I have ideas that I would go like, oh, there needs to be more of this. it just feels like, you know, that we've got to move on to something else. Yeah, I mean, yeah, someone in chat said everyone's just making Balatro clones now. Sure, yeah. Yeah, you're probably right. Smash TV Balatro. There you go. Yeah, man. There's something like about that style of game that I think is really well done. When it's really well done, those games are super fun. And they're light, you know. It's not to say they can't get intense, but generally, you know, with it automatically shooting for you, it's like there's just a part of your brain that gets to switch off a little bit more, and you get to focus more on just like dodging and navigating, and you know, becomes kind of a different skill thing. And I like that about that genre of games, the auto shooting survival game. But I don't know, man. There's a lot of them. There's a ton that I haven't played still on top of that, so I feel like I could go dig through a bunch of those and play. If I really wanted more of those, I'm sure you could find them. I like seeing that Hades 2 now has a 1.0 release date. I'm actually looking forward to getting back into that. Speaking of games that got cloned in a billion different ways, and like the number of things that people lifted from Hades 1, and in terms of how characters are sometimes presented and shown and everything, I feel like Hades has ended up being very influential over the years. I played a lot of Hades 2 when it first hit early access. I put a lot of hours into that, and you know, it was not, you know, there was not always a ton of content there, but I made some real progress in that game, and then I have not touched it since then. Like, I definitely hit a point with it where I was like, you know what, I'm gonna wait on this one. With Hades 1, I would check in on it every 3 months, 6 months, you know, just like, well, 6 months, but I checked in on it probably 4 or 5 times over the course of their early access journey. With this one, I have not. Well, you know, like with this one, I played it and I was like, this is cool. I get why they're making another Hades game. Like, this feels like really fucking cool. And I want to see the final game. So that's right around the corner. So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into that and seeing what's up with it. Maybe I'll play it on Switch too. I feel like either way, I think I'll start over, because it's just been so long that I was like, mechanically, I'm like, I don't remember. Who do I go to for this item, or this? Who do I go to buy this or buy this or buy this? You know, there's a lot of stuff that just, you know, I probably have forgotten at this point with that game. So yeah, I'll probably start fresh once they hit 1.0. That's gonna do it for the program. Thanks everybody for writing in. Again, podcast@guard.bike is the email address. If you want to send me an email, that's the one and only address to do it. Send me an email, and we'll I don't know, we'll talk about something. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll play some games tomorrow. I don't know. Maybe we'll look at Dragon's Lair running on the Mister or something. It's not. I don't think it's like quite like playable or whatever, but. So maybe it's a little too soon for that, but I don't know. We'll find something. We'll play some video games. We'll do something on the internet tomorrow here, and then next week, if everything goes according to plan, one Ben Pack will be with us. So come on back next week. We'll see what's up with that guy. And talk about the world of video games. Do come through. Do check out the Patreon as well. Patreon.com/Jeff Gerstmann for all of your video gaming needs and such. There's a bonus podcast and ad-free version of this podcast and videos and so on and so forth, all over there for you to keep up with if you're looking for a way to keep up with it. And with that, I will see you tomorrow morning, and then you know, of course, on Friday we'll rank some 8-bit Nintendo games, and we'll do it to it. Everybody have a good rest of your week, and I will see you soon.